ROM hacks are starting to overtake the mainline Pokemon games in terms of popularity, and are something to be celebrated, seeing how far they've come now. But let's go back to where it all started. Drayano's ROM hacks are a classic. In his very first game, Fire Red Omega, was not only his first ROM hack, but many people's first ROM hack experience ever. It was not only my first experience with a ROM hack, but also my first time nuzlocking a game in general. Fire Red Omega is a classic, but it's still very fun to play even though it's pretty old, and even though we have games like Radical Red. This game is simply fun. Now I have nuzlocked this game a ridiculous amount of times, with every starter, with EVs, without EVs, with and without rare candies, and have implemented increasingly difficult rule sets, making my rules hardcore nuzlocks. I went even as far as to nuzlock the entire game without a single casualty, while also being underleveled for many key fights, along with actually nuzlocking post-game. Imagine that. I know my stuff about this game. This video will be me ranking the nuzlocke viability of every mon in the national decks, based on how helpful they are in a nuzlocke, with S tiered being really invaluable mons to have in your run. I will be explaining in detail why I rank each and every mon, where I rank them, and their strengths. There will be things to consider, such as how several Pokemon have received alterations or buffs from their base forms, especially the starters. Also, some mons' viability will really depend on what starter you take, as it affects the rival's team in Pokemon that you will be fighting repeatedly throughout the game, and I will highlight that when I get to that. Also, these mons are assumed to not have any effort values, as EV training in general can make almost any Pokemon automatically good regardless. Now before I start the list, remember that, well, this is 95% the objective big brain truth. I might actually be kind of sort of wrong or inaccurate in some of my rankings. It's crazy, I know, but feel free to make your own alterations or cases in the comment section below. So, let's begin the tier list. Okay, so here's my tier list. Now we have all the mons here. This might take a while to get through, but let's get started. So first of all, Venusaur. Now this is a gift mon that you can get right before Rock Tunnel. Venusaur, I always pick it up as my encounter for that route. I feel it's okay. I'll put it in maybe A-. You get it right before Lieutenant Surge, so it's good for Lieutenant Surge because grass type with solid special defense that resists electric types. It's also pretty good for Erica, and that is literally it. I never use this mon anywhere else, but because it's good for those two fights and it's guaranteed A-, I feel its moveset really sucks. Its strongest move is Razor Leaf, and you don't get Sludge Bomb because it's a TM in post game, which is really dumb, and by that point you just won't be using Venusaur anyways, which is a shame. Next up is Charizard, and this mon, honestly, I would put this in B tier, potentially even C tier. The problem with Charizard is its typing sucks. That's not very surprising. You get this after Erica's gym, so after the point you would really need this mon is when you get it. So it's completely useless. I've never had a situation where I wish I had a Charizard. Literally never. The only situation is against potentially the rival fight right before the Elite Four and in the Elite Four when he has a grass type with Frenzy Plant. Charizard would be good for that, but you probably have Scizor, which does the same thing but better anyways. And the other thing is, there's better encounters in Rock Tunnel to get over Charizard anyways, like Geodude, Zubat, and especially Beldum and Onix. Like, why not just go for them instead? So, unsurprisingly, Charizard sucks. Blastoise, I feel like this mon is pretty decent, though I never pick it in my runs. This mon you have to get in Vermilion City. The problem is you would much rather get the guaranteed Dratini, which you can actually manip to guarantee it, and then you can trade it for an almost perfect IV Tyranitar. That's just better than Blastoise, and you don't actually need Blastoise, really. Now that I think about it, I don't think you need this mon at all. It might be okay in some cases, but it's still a water type, which are always good, and it's got pretty good bulk. I'll put it in A-, but probably the bottom end of A-. you really just don't need it that much at all. But it's still an alright mon in its own right. Butterfree, this mon, I don't think I've ever actually gotten this mon. Like maybe once or twice. This is going probably in B tier, purely because you can get it early on. Actually, maybe even C tier. Actually, I would put this in C tier, honestly. This literally doesn't do anything apart from potential compound sleep powder, which is still kind of risky because you can still miss. And it literally does nothing, and then your opponent could just wake up in 2 turns. I really don't see Butterfree doing anything. The only place I could possibly ever see Butterfree being a good mon would be against Erica's Blossom, but you're going to have several better mons by that point anyways, like Venusaur. Why would you ever need a Butterfree? It's just pointless. Beedrill, honestly, Beedrill I think might actually be better. The reason why, probably B or A minus, actually I think maybe B. You could make an argument for A minus. Actually, it's kind of hard to say A minus, B. The reason why Beedrill's actually not as bad as you might think is because it has Twin Needle early on, and it has a Swarm ability, and its stats are pretty decent for the point that you get it, which is right at the start of the game. Against Brock it does nothing. But if you're picking Elekid, Smoochum that your rival has is an absolute demon. That thing is absolutely horrible to fight. Especially at Nugget Bridge, you have to fight a Smoochum with 95 special attack, Ice Punch and Confusion. Almost literally nothing in the game can beat it 1v1. Beedrill is one of the very few mons at that point that actually can beat it, because it takes a non-crit, then goes into Swarm range, they can one-shot it with Twin Needle. Almost literally no mons can actually beat the Smoochum 1v1, like maybe Eradicate or Marshtomp, and even then, it's not guaranteed. Granted, the Beedrill is not guaranteed, you have to dodge a crit and not get confused by Confusion, but still solid for that. And you can actually use it against Misty. It can deal a lot of damage to this Starmie, potentially one-shot it with Swarm. And it's still got alright stats at that point, and it's pretty good for Erica, and you can sack it there. Honestly, I'd put in A minus actually, just because it makes the Nugget Bridge fight so much easier, and that is a really rough point in Nuzlocks. Pidgeot, this thing sucks, C tier. You literally never use it at all in your runs. Literally never. The only point you would want to use it is for Erica, at which point it doesn't even evolve at that point, so there's literally no reason. You can literally guarantee Farfetch'd in a trade, which is a much better mon, and there's going to be so many other mons that you just rather use over it. No point using Pidgeot. Now Eradicate, this mon is a boost in B, really. Guts I feel is way too gimmicky. In my runs I don't really allow Guts abuse anyways with Facade. I can't remember where you get Facade, I think it's like pretty late on. But its stats really aren't that good, and it's really hard to abuse anyways. And even if you do pre-poison it, you're going to have to give it TM return, which you do not want to do. Eradicate isn't that fast, so a decent amount of mons could just one-shot it with a crit. And it's strong, but it's not that strong. The reason why Eradicate isn't that bad... Actually, you know what? I could make an argument for it being A-. The two really good things with Eradicate is, one, it is better than Charizard for sure. It can beat Nugget Bridge Smoochum, which is very important because that mon is an incredibly hard one to beat. And it can be pretty solid against Sabrina, because you can just give it Shadow Ball and beat some Psychic types, and it's a pretty good sack. Sabrina's probably the hardest gym leader in the game, so having a mon that can make that gym fight easier is pretty important. But yeah, you don't really need it in your runs. Fearow, I would say Fearow is B tier. It's Pidgeot but better, and it evolves earlier. So it's literally the exact same mon, but you get it earlier on. What's not to like? Ekans, I would say this mon is C tier. With Intimidate, you can definitely make an argument for B tier, and even then it's not that great. The mons where you would want to use Arbok against, a lot of them have Earthquake, like Giovanni's Kangaskhan, or like Persian with Double Edge, it'll just KO you with a crit anyways. And that's if it even has Intimidate. Without Intimidate, it's literally worthless. no poison moves at all, apart from TM Sludge Bomb in post game, and who on earth is going to use Arbok in post game? Really. You can give it TM Dig and use it against Lieutenant Surge because it's got okay special defense, which is fine, but then again, why would you not give TM Dig to the guaranteed Marshtomp? Like, why wouldn't you do that instead? Yeah, you could make an argument for B, but I'll probably put in C tier. Raichu, this can depend. This could be an A minus, but it's very IV reliant. Only if its IVs are good. It's usually going to be B tier. The reason why is because you only get access to Raichu, I think it's like after Lieutenant Surge, at which point you already don't need it as much. Like, it can hold a Thunderstone when you catch it, which is cool, and that can take out like 3 mons of Misty's team, but the reality is, if you're picking Elekid as your starter, Elekid, and especially Electabuzz, is Raichu but ridiculously better. You have no real reason to use Raichu over Electabuzz. You're guaranteed insanely good electric type starter. But fast electric types are still okay-ish. It's just, you could maybe sack it at some point, but you're going to have better electric types anyways. Next up is Sandslash, and this is going to be an A tier mon. You could maybe make an argument for S tier. No, I think that's a bit too much. I think A tier is very reasonable. The reason why this mon is very good, underratedly good, is because you get this before Misty, so you get this pretty early on. It gets Dig, which is an 80 base power ground move, which you can just teach it by TM. It's got pretty good attack and very solid physical defense, and this is good for several fights. It's very good for Lieutenant Surge. No joke, this with Electabuzz can literally sweep Lieutenant Surge with a guaranteed Marshtomp as well. Just 6-0 almost all of his team. If you pivot with Electabuzz, you Thunder Wave the Manectric, then bay out electric move, go into Sandslash, Sandslash spams Dig, you beat Lieutenant Surge 6-0, which is really good because that fight can have some risks to it. It's also really good for pretty much all of the rival fights, because he's going to have an Ampharos on his team, and that thing can be really demonic. Yes, you have Marshtomp, but having a backup ground type is also really good, so you don't have to risk your Swampert, which is really nice. It's also very good for Koga, and that's a really dangerous fight because the Electrode on his team has Explosion, and you do not want to risk your Swampert to that, so you'd much rather risk your Sandslash instead. And it's also really good for Giovanni and the Rocket Hideout because it does pretty well against the Kangaskhan, which is really demonic, and the Persian Chew because it has good physical attack and defense, and it's got Brick Break, giving it pretty good advantage in that situation. So it's a very solid mon. I really like Sandslash. It's good seeing it be viable for once. For a similar reason, Nidoqueen and Nidoking, both very good. Literally the exact same reasons. Good ground types that you get early on, same matchups. They're better in some cases, worse in others. They don't have as much physical bulk, but they do have special coverage and they're faster. And the poison type can maybe be better in some cases. For example, Nidoqueen can be used to pivot on Erika's Vileplume because it 4x his Sludge Bomb. But yeah, all three very good mons. You just cannot go wrong with these if you get these early on. Very nice. Next up is Clefable. This doesn't really do anything much. You could put it in B tier because at the very least you can give it a Moonstone before Nugget Bridge Rival and it can maybe take 1 or 2 hits, and you can give it Secret Power and it can sort of do something to Misty. You would never do that because you would much rather give your Secret Power to Gyarados, but I guess you could. It's still pretty bad, and you could maybe do some soft boiled Moonlights stall, give it lots of special attacking moves like Ice Beam and Thunderbolt. It's not a good mon, but you can do something with it, I guess. Next up is Ninetales. This, I feel, depending on where you get it, I would put it in B tier, but you could definitely make an argument for A minus. If you get it, actually I'll put it in A minus. The reason why is because you get this right before Mount Moon, and it can hold a Firestone when you catch it. And if it has a Firestone and you can evolve it to Ninetales early on, before Mount Moon, that is very good. This is basically one of the only, almost literally guaranteed counters to Nugget Bridge Smoochum that you can get. So for that alone makes it really good. Flash Fire means you could use it against Lieutenant Surge, and it's also pretty good against Erica, and you could potentially use it against your rival if your rival has Jinx as well later on. You can hit it with Flame Forward. Still not a good matchup, but you can kind of use it as a sack, I guess. And you can use it against Koga as well to beat the Fortress. So it's really good for early game, but it has some uses later on as well. So it's alright. Wigglytuff, this thing, I put it in B tier. Actually, yeah, probably bottom end of B tier. Like, it doesn't do anything. You can use it against Misty, and that's literally it. Vileplume, this thing goes in E tier. Oddish, you can get at the start of the game. It's very, very good for the first 3 gyms. Very, very good. Granted, you don't really use it afterwards, but it's still a very solid mon, because it just gets you through the hardest parts of the game. It gets your runs going and actually gets your runs off the ground. Oddish is very good for Brock. It can beat several of his mons. You can get Vileplume for Misty. I do think Blossom is better, but you can still use Vileplume, honestly. It still works. And then you can use against Lieutenant Surge as well. And you can actually use it against Erica as well, because of the poison typing. You're not going to use it that much afterwards, but the mere fact that it's really useful for these early key boss battles alone makes it more useful than most of the other mons on this list. Parasect, C tier, maybe even less. I literally don't know what this does. You get this in Mount Moon. I can't really think of a reason to use this. Okay, you can. I'll put it in C tier because you could use this against Lieutenant Surge. If you give it Dig and Parasect, it's still got good attack and resist electro types. It walls out his Raichu, for example. You could still use this against Lieutenant Surge, but that's literally it. So yeah. Venomoth, this thing, D tier. I have never once ever used this Pokemon in a Nuzlocke. The only point you get Venomoth is like into late game, at which point you have absolutely zero reason to ever use it. It just sucks. The only good thing about getting a Venomoth or a Venonat is that it's a dupe to get guaranteed slacking later on. And that's it. It just does nothing. It's basically Beedrill at home, and that is saying something. Next up is Dugtrio. This thing deserves to be an A-. Fast ground type with pretty usable physical attack, and you can get it before Lieutenant Surge. And it's got Arena Trap to help you stop mons from using Roar and Teleport, so it can guarantee you catching Abra, which is very useful as well. Abra's a very good mon. So that alone makes it A-. You can maybe make an argument for A, but I don't think it's as good as Sandslash, but it makes Lieutenant Surge so much easier, and you can use it for the rival fights as well, and you can use it for Koga. So that alone gives it some use, and the Arena Trap shenanigans to catch certain mons. Pretty good mon. Persian, this thing, honestly, I think deserves to be an A-. The reason why is because you can get Meowth right before Misty. Persian itself does almost literally nothing. The only use you can really find for Persian is that it's a fast Shadow Baller that you can use against Sabrina, and it's pretty good for there. You can use it to beat Gengar, for example. But the main reason why I think Persian is good is because Meowth has Pickup, and Pickup early on lets you get really good items that you otherwise would not be getting at that point in the game. You can get infinite berries in Berry Forest and Island 3, but Pickup lets you get them just much earlier. You want to get Persian Berries and Cherry Berries for Misty and Lieutenant Surge, and Chesto Berries for that pesky Jinx. So yeah, that alone makes Persian go from garbage to actually kind of usable. Golduck does nothing, really. It's a usable water type for sure, but by the time you get it, you're going to have a million other better water types. So you have no reason to ever use this, really. I've never found a use for Golduck, really. It's kind of unfortunate. Primeape, This thing deserves to be an A- because fighting type that you can get at the start of the game. Pretty much it. Good for Brock. Then it becomes good for Giovanni in Game Corner, which is a pretty hard fight. It's only really good for those two fights, but those can be really RNG fights. It's also, you could use it against Giovanni in the final Gym 8 fights, I guess. And you can use it against the Persians that you fight with Double Edge. But fighting types are pretty useful, I would say, for that. So that automatically makes it A-, really. Arcanine with Intimidate, I would say A-, but probably not as useful as the other A- mons, but still pretty nice, especially with Intimidate. Good mixed attacking stats. You can give it Dig, Secret Power, Extreme Speed, Flamethrower. You can use it to weaken certain demonic physical attackers. It's decently useful. You don't need it that much, but it's just a nice mon in general. Stat wise, it's pretty good. Polarath I would put honestly an A-, but I think Polarath is probably the upper end of A-, I would say. The reason why is because a fighting type with a good bulk and water type is pretty useful, and water sword can be useful as well. You can get this. Actually, you know what? I might put this in A, maybe the bottom end of A. You can get this right before Brock. So it's useful for Brock. It can actually outspeed his demonic Onyx if it's got good enough IVs, which is really useful. Then you can use it for the first Giovanni fight and the second one and the third one. And you could potentially use it for Elite Four, and you can use it for the rival fights too to counter the Houndoom, because the rival will always have a Houndoom in his fights. And Polarath will almost always hard counter it. It's got Super Power, which is a 120 base power move. In the final Giovanni fight with the Tyranitar, Super Power can just one-shot it. Good stats, good typing, solid mon, really. Alakazam. This thing deserves to be an S-. It's not too hard to get. You can actually guarantee it at Game Corner if you want. Really fast Psychic type, really strong, amazing coverage. Now, I know people hate on the Gen 3 physical special split, or the lack of it, but Alakazam is one of the mons that actually benefited from the lack of a physical special split. Thunder Punch, Fire Punch, Ice Punch, it all gets those at evolutions. It means its coverage is just insane with Psychic. It's almost everything super effectively. It's crazy. It can one-shot quite a lot of things. And you can actually bring this to Elite Four and for the champion, really. And for post-game, I actually think this is a really good mon as well. It's not as good as another Psychic type that I'm going to be putting on this list, but it's still a very good mon. It can be IV reliant though, that's the one thing. You need to make sure its special attack and speed IVs are good, but if it is, it's going to be a really powerful special attacker. Really good. Machamp, I will put this maybe A- or at the bottom of A. Actually, I'll put this in A-, but more the higher end. It's just another really good fighting type. Just like literally the same reasoning as Polarath, the only difference that you get it a little bit later on. But yeah, it switches in on normal types like Kangaskhan and Persian and things like Tyranitar. It just blasts them in one fighting move. Really powerful. Revenge is just a really strong move. It's pretty much good for those fights, really. Victory Bell. This I will put in A-, for the exact same reasons as Vileplume, but it's a worse version of Vileplume. But it's still useful. You get it early on. You can get it before Gym 1. You can get Weeping Bell for Misty, which is nowhere near as good as Vileplume. But you can get this for Lieutenant Surge, which is still pretty useful. And you can use it for Erica, and that's kind of it. It's still nice for early game, really. Tentacruel, this can go in maybe B or A-. Tentacruel is a solid mon. Actually, I'll put it in B. Tentacruel is a solid mon. Do not get me wrong, I like Tentacruel. The only reason is you can, like, Tentacruel is only available once you get Surf, and at that point, you're most likely not going to need it, unless you've lost so many good mons in a run. You're almost always going to have your Milotic and Gyarados, for example, still alive and just other better mons like Lapras and Snorlax. You're just going to have those mons which are just better special walls than Tentacruel anyways. Tentacruel is still pretty fast, good special defense, it can wall out quite a few things. But for the Elite Four, I actually don't think it's that good because there's quite a lot of like Earthquakes and Psychics going around, and it doesn't get any offensive poison moves. You get Sludge Bomb in post game, and that's it. So yeah, still pretty solid in its own right. Golem, this thing deserves to be an A tier. You can get Geodude and Mount Moon, and you can use it throughout the game really. You can use it against Lieutenant Surge, you can use it against some of the rival fight. Actually, can be, yeah, you can use it against his Amphiroses. You can use it in all of the Giovanni fights. You can use it against Koga. You can use it to counter all the Crobats, actually. And there's a lot of Crobats in this game. And they can be really problematic because most of the Crobats, they'll outspeed almost everything. And you have Hypnosis, Confuse Rate, and they could just be RNG demons, but Golem is tanky enough to just tank them up, really. It's pretty solid mon. I don't really need to explain why Golem is good. Rapidash. I would say B tier. The only reason it's not lower is because you can get Ponyta in Route 1, and Ponyta has okay-ish chances against Nugget Bridge Smoochum. You can sack it to Nugget Bridge Smoochum, and it can at least chip it down a good chunk. Because it can usually outspeed it and use Stomp. It can actually beat Smoochum if you're really lucky. That's literally it. It's probably the worst fire type in the game. Worse than Ninetales and Arcanine. There's really no other reason to use it. It just sucks, really. Slowbro. I actually am not that big of a fan of Slowbro. Even though Slowbro is a demon in almost every game it's in. This game, I just don't find a use for Slowbro. I don't even catch Slowbro in general. I just don't encounter it. But the reason why, there's another Water Psychic type that is ridiculously better than Slowbro. It's basically Slowbro but way faster and has better coverage. So why would you ever use Slowbro over that? And there are other mons that can just do Slowbro's job better than it. I don't think it's got Slack Off in this game. I don't think it does. So it can't even heal itself up. Snorlax, for example, is just better. So yeah, it's still a decent mon because Water Psychic and good defenses and water types in general are just really dominant in this meta. But I think that's pretty fair. Magneton, this deserves to be an A tier. Steel Electric type is obviously very good, counters all the Crobats, a lot of the normal types that you come up against, a lot of the grass types, and Magnet Pool is very, very valuable ability. Very good. It gives you a 50% chance, well, almost a 50% chance of getting a Beldum in Rock Tunnel. And Beldum is one of the best mons in the whole game, especially if you're picking Electabuzz as your starter, because Metagross is one of the very, very few Jinx answers you can get, like an actual counter. And you can get Beldum in post game as well, which gives you a good chance for that. Its defenses aren't great. Its special defense makes it so even critical hit psychics from Jinx could potentially do a huge amount of damage. This can resist Jinx's dual stab. It's not the best counter really. It doesn't really do that much to it back, but it's still good against the mons that it can wall out like Crobats. And Magnet Pool is really nice. Farfetch'd, this thing I will put it in probably B tier. This mon, now usually Farfetch'd is absolutely trash, but in this game it got plus 20 to each of its base stats, so it's actually not that bad. And the reason why Farfetch'd is actually kind of usable is because you can guarantee getting yourself a Tailo, and you can trade that Tailo for a literal perfect Farfetch'd. It has almost literally perfect IVs and adamant nature, and it's holding a stick with its buff stats. It's not bad. It's not insane either, really, don't get me wrong, but the big issue is that you can't actually use it for Erica unless you go into the fight at level 30 because of the obedience cap, but its stats are still pretty solid, and at least it's not the worst normal flying type anymore. But yeah, pretty much you could use it against Misty if you really wanted to, give it secret power. that's pretty much it. Same with Dodrio. There's no real reason to get Dodrio because I think the only place you can get it is the route next to Celadon City, but you almost always want to get Snorlax there. This is good against Erica, and that's literally it. Which is kind of unfortunate, because I do kind of like Dodrio, and it does have good stats, but just typing just means it doesn't really do that much. Dugong is another mon that just gets overshadowed, really. You're guaranteed to get a Lapras, which is literally Dugong, but much better. By the time you get Dugong, which I think is like towards the end of the game, there's just no real reason to use it. Unfortunately, its stats are actually power crept by other water types, which you will see in this list. Water Ice with Thick Fat can be cool, but it doesn't really do anything apart from Surf and Ice Beam. It gets Rest by level up, which is cool, so if it's got like a Calm Nature with great IVs, Leftovers Protect Rest, you can maybe do something with that, but just use a Lapras instead, really. Muck, I think this could be A-. The reason why is because you get this really late on in the game, but it does have good stats, and this actually is a poison type that actually gets Sludge Bomb by level up, which is pretty cool. Good attack, good special defense. It's a pretty nice mon, really. It's just you get this really late on, otherwise it would be better. But it's still pretty strong. Cloyster, B tier. There's almost literally no fights where you need a Cloyster, and even if there is, Shell Armor Lapras is the exact same mon but ridiculously better. And this thing just gets vaporized by any special attack. It's just pointless, really. Gengar, okay, a good mon. This goes S-. Similar reasoning to Alakazam, but different. It doesn't have Psychic, but it does get really buffed by the old physical special split of having elemental punches, which it gets on evolution. Fire Punch, Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, really good coverage. You can use this for quite a few fights. Unfortunately, it doesn't really get Sludge Bomb because that's post game and Shadow Ball is physical, but it's still a pretty useful mon. Actually, I think it's very good. I really like it. I brought this to post-game Elite 4 actually on both my times I made it there. The thing that makes Gengar really good is good special attack, great speed, great typing. It's really good for pivoting. Ghost Poison with Levitate means it's got 3 immunities and it's 4 times resistant to Bug, which means it basically has 4 immunities. It's really good for pivoting, especially because in post-game there are certain mons that are incredibly powerful, like Bruno's Choice Band Ursaring, and you can use this to abuse the Choice Band and just give you a free win. It also gets Thunderbolt, and it can learn TM Psychic, but don't give TM Psychic to Gengar, you want to give it to something else instead. Still a very good mon, really, and it's very easy to get as well. I think in post-game you can actually guarantee it, so very nice. Hypno I think could be potentially A- if you get it early on. The only reason why is because it's a Psychic type with really good special defense and it gets Shadow Ball. Decent against Jinx, really good against Sabrina, and that's it, but those are some pretty hard fights, so the fact that it's good there means it's automatically somewhat usable, pretty much it. Kingler, awful. Kingler literally does nothing. No reason to use it. Electrode, this can be... I think this could be A-. The reason why is because this got a special attack buff. It got plus 20 to its special attack, so it's actually pretty strong. And it can outspeed Crobats, which you will be fighting a lot of. So it's pretty good. It is Electabuzz at home, pretty much, but it still has use. It's not that good, really, but it's not bad either. It's a nice mon to get, really. Executor. I've never really found a use for Executor. There's actually a trade where you can, in Singapore Island, you can trade a Granbull for an almost perfect Modest Nature Executor. Even then, I still don't really find a use for it. I'll put it in A- because the Executor that you do get in the trade has really good stats. But Executor just isn't that useful. By the time you get it, you don't need it, really. Actually, you know what, I'll put it in B. purely because it's a strong mon, but by the time you get it, it can't really be used. In post-game Elite Four, this gets destroyed by every Elite Four member. Its typing just doesn't really work. And I don't think it... I think it does learn Psychic. Does it learn Psychic by level up? I'm not sure. If it doesn't, that's really bad. And I don't know if it gets Giga Drain either. Like, yeah, it could be used, but it's going to be really hard to get the most out of it. Marowak is fine, but it's just like, I mean, it's a ground type, which automatically puts in like A-, like at least A-, but it's probably one of the worst ground types. By the time you get it, you're already halfway through the game, and it's literally just a worse version of Sandslash. You can give it Fit Club and it can do things. Okay, yeah, with Fit Club it can do things, I'll give it that, but you just get it much later than Sandslash. So its use has already been kind of diminished at that point, really. Hitmonlee, I'll put this thing in B tier. It's one of the least effective fighting types because it's got by far the worst physical defense, and physical defense of fighting type is really useful for all the strong physical attackers that you want to use fighting types to counter. So you just don't need it very much. Hitmonchan is better. I think it's still a B tier mon, but it's a better B tier mon, I would say. Just because it's got much more physical defense, so it can actually take a hit, and it has Revenge, which is a really powerful move, and it's got Mach Punch. So you can actually use it against the really powerful Tyranitar. You can sack Hitmonchan and still get some good damage off. So at least it does something. Lickitung, this thing is... I'll say this thing is pretty worthless, really. The only thing that Lickitung is good at, the only reason why it could be in C tier, is because in Cerulean City, you can trade a route to an NPC for a Lickitung with almost perfect IVs and Adamant Nature, and it's holding TM Thunderbolt, and you can use that TM Thunderbolt, giving you a big advantage for Misty, if you even need it. But you probably don't want to trade the routes, and you probably don't even need Thunderbolts, and you'll probably just beat Misty anyways, and what are you doing with Lickitung? Nothing, really. You're doing nothing. Same with Weezing. Weezing is not a bad mon, but by the time you get Weezing, you're not using it anywhere, and it's got literally no good attacking options. It's got Sludge, a 65 base power move, and that's it. You can give it Flamethrower and Thunderbolt, but what are you using this against? Special attackers will just destroy Weezing in one crit anyways, and Weezing isn't strong enough to take out anything. It's a wall that can't really do anything, and even then, it's not even a good wall. It can wall out some physical attackers, and that's it. It's not even that good. Rhydon, literally the exact same reasoning is Golem. You do get it later on though, so it's probably a worse version of Golem. But still, it's basically Golem, but you get it a little bit later on. Pretty much. Tangela, this thing sucks. You get Tangela later on after you get Surf, and it's literally worse than all the other grass types, like Venusaur. No reason to ever use it. Kangaskhan, I'll put it in B tier. You get it late on as well, but at least it does have decent stats, and it has Rest, and I think it gets Body Slam by level up. It can do something. You can use it in some of the Giovanni fights, I guess. It's got some alright bulk. Some pretty solid bulk, actually. It's just not something that you really need, but it's not garbage either. Seeking is garbage. By the time you get Seeking, water types are absolutely broken in this game, but where the hell are you ever going to use a Seeking? You're just not. Golduck is ridiculously better, and even Golduck isn't that good. Speaking of water types being the meta, Starmie, S tier. Starmie is literally one of, if not the best mon in the entire game. Starmie is just crazy good. Really, really fast, good special attack. Water Psychic, which walls out a lot of things. It can hit so many things super effectively in some of the best coverage in the entire game. Surf, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Stab Psychic, Recover. Incredible. This mon can be used in so many fights, and it's extremely good for both of the Elite Four fights, the main game and the post game. A good enough Starmie can take out most of Lorelai's team. It can completely sweep Bruno, and it can almost sweep Bruno in post-game too. It can do some work against Agatha, though it's not really that good there, but you could potentially sweep Lance with this as well, if it's got good enough IVs. Ice Beam will just destroy all the Dragon Flying types, which Lance has 3 of, I think. Yes, he's got 3 of them. Thunderbolt will take out the Gyarados that you find. Bruno in post-game has Gyarados too, this can sweep him. Surf can take out all the rock types. Psychic's good against Machamp. This can also somewhat handle Metagross, and if it's got good enough IVs with Mystic Water and Badge Boost, it can actually take out the rival's Houndoom in one hit. It's so good. And Recover means it can actually kind of stall out quite a few of Lorelai's mons as well with leftovers. It's just an incredibly good mon. You probably already know how good Stormy is if you played Fire Red. It's kind of a no-brainer. And the thing is, even with not the best IVs, it's still incredibly useful, I found out, because you still destroy all the mons that... If Stormy has low speed, it still outspeeds most of the things that you'd be using against anyways. Like most of Lorelai's team and all of Bruno's team, Stormy will just always counter and outspeed them regardless of its speed IV, so it doesn't even matter. It's just, even with bad natures, it's still a really good one, and that's what sets it apart from like Alakazam and Gengar. That and its coverage is incredible. Mr. Mime, I think A tier is fair. The reason why Mr. Mime is good is because you can guarantee a Mr. Mime in a trade. You can trade a Magnemite to an NPC and get a Mr. Mime with almost literally perfect IVs in Modest Nature, which is very good. I don't know if this thing got a stat buff, but its stats are really good by default. Fast Psychic type, good special defense, has Psychic. It's got Encore, and that's really cool for certain fights. It's Alakazam, but slower with less coverage, but it's got Encore, I guess. It's guaranteed to have good IVs. So it's a pretty solid mon. You probably don't need it that much, but I just really like it, honestly. Now we're getting to the juicy part right here. Jinx. Jinx is S tier. Yeah, what else can I say? Probably the most terrifying Pokemon in this entire game. If you have played with Elekid as your starter, you know how much of a menace Jinx actually is. Jinx from the base game with plus 10 to all of its stats, meaning it's got 105 speed, 125 special attack, and 105 special defense. Psychic Ice means almost literally no Pokemon in the whole game are able to counter it, which is crazy. Very, very few mons can actually counter it. Steel types can. In fact, Jinx is so strong that a lot of steel types like Scizor and Magneton are not even guaranteed counters. Psycho Boost crit will do a humongous amount. I think Magnemite can potentially go down to a Psycho Boost crit if it's got ban off IVs. Also, this thing has, it's got Ice Beam freeze hacks. It's also got Lovely Kiss on almost all the sets that you fight, and you fight this a lot of times throughout the game. The rival has it, and Sabrina has it too, and the champion has it. They all use Lovely Kiss, which can just put your whole team to sleep if you're not careful, and Jinx is faster than most mons. It's pretty hard to outspeed. Electabuzz and Starmie are usually like the only things in your run that can outspeed it, and most of the mons are slower. Most of them can just get destroyed by a crit, and even the mons that can wall out Jinx like Metagross and Snorlax, they can still be put to sleep by Lovely Kiss, potentially Calm Mind set up on, and just destroyed with a Psycho Boost crit. Almost literally nothing is safe against Jinx. It's extremely hard to counter. Even things like Houndoom, you still need to be careful. In the hands of the player, it's very powerful. It can basically sweep Lorelai, it can sweep most of Bruno's team. With a plus speed nature, this can outspeed and absolutely vaporize Gengars. It can also put in some work against Lance. The only reason why I don't think Jinx is the best mon to use is because its coverage is not as good as Electabuzz, where that can hit more things super effectively, but still a very powerful mon. very good stats. Insomnia is also really good because so many mons in this game like to abuse the hell out of sleep moves. So that's just very good. Electabuzz. This is probably literally the best mon in the game. I'm not joking. This is probably just as good as Starmie, Electabuzz. If not, even better, which is absolutely disgusting. Fast Electric type. You can basically manipulate, so it has great stats everywhere. Electabuzz from base game with plus 10 to every stat. Volt Absorb, which is a very useful ability. You can use it for Brock. It's extremely good for Misty. It's good for all the rival fights because with a modest nature, it can actually outspeed the rival's Crobat with a level advantage and with the badge boost. Electabuzz is just that fast. It's got pretty solid special defense, so you can use it against Jinx if you have to. It's really good against Misty. This will automatically outspeed and one-shot Misty's first 3 mons. It can actually take out Misty's 4th mon as well. This could take out 4 of Misty's mons, basically on its own, as an Elekid. That's like before it's even evolved. It's also really good against Lieutenant Surge, because it is Volt Absorb. So just like an Emerald Kaizo, you can kind of abuse that against AI. It's really good against the first Giovanni fight as well, because it takes out 2 of his mons instantly, and it can outspeed the Persian. You can use it in other fights too. It's really good for Sabrina. It hard counters Gengar, because Gengar usually goes for Thunderbolt, and this can Volt Absorb that, then outspeed and 2-shot it. This thing has incredible coverage. Thunderbolt, Volt Tackle, which is basically Double Edge but a special type electric attacking move, which is very powerful. It's got Fire Punch, Ice Punch, and Psychic. It's just incredible. In Elite 4, at level 68 with a modest nature, Electabuzz, which is actually below the level cap of 69 by the way, Electabuzz literally sweeps Lorelei 6-0. Sweeps her 6-0. Against Agatha, Electabuzz literally is capable of sweeping Agatha 6-0. And then, if you do that, Electabuzz should be like level 70 by the time you get to Lance. And guess what? Electabuzz is sweeping Lance. I actually tested this myself. A perfect IV, modest nature, badge boosted, level 68 Electabuzz, which is below the level cap, will almost always 6-0 Lance, the hardest Elite 4 member. That is crazy. Thunderbolt will always one-shot the Charizard, especially with a magnet. Ice Punch will basically handle the Dragonites, and I think the Salamence, and you can just Thunderbolt Gyarados, and it can actually outspeed the Aerodactyl, which is just incredible because of the level advantage that you do have. This mon is just insanely good. The only bad thing about Electabuzz is that your rival will have Jinx, so be prepared for that. But even in post-game, Electabuzz, it's still a demon against Elite 4 rematch. It really is. Very good mon. It's so good. Super fast, hits hard, so much coverage, Bolt Beam, good enough special defense, Volt Absorb. What's not to like? Just be careful of earthquakes, really. Now the final Fire Red Omega starter, Magmar. Unfortunately, this is by far the worst one. It's probably not even as good as Gengar and Alakazam, and that kind of hurts to be honest, because I like Magmar. The reason why Magmar is not as good as Electabuzz and Jinx, it's got the worst stats of the 3. It's basically like Electabuzz, but a tiny little bit more special attack, noticeably more physical attack, but significantly less speed. The problem is, physical attacks on all 3 of these mons, you don't want to use physical attacks. You always want to go like minus attack, so either timid or modest. You just don't care about physical coverage. So that extra attack that Magmar has is wasted, and the speed that Magmar loses just means it's worse than Electabuzz. Along with having worse typing, we know fire types in Gen 3, they're not that good. In Flash Fire, it's not that good. Flash Fire barely ever comes up in this game. It's good for Lieutenant Surge, and that's literally it. I've never had a fight where my perfect IV modest nature Magmar actually needed the Flash Fire boost. Defensively, it's really bad typing. It doesn't resist much of anything. It's good against Erica, but that's a pretty easy gym fight anyways. Probably the easiest gym fight in the game. Against Elite Four, Magmar is at a disadvantage against literally every single member. Bruno has a lot of rock types and earthquake users. It's fine against Agatha, but Agatha's Gengar in Crobat will outspeed it, and Magmar is not able to one-shot. So it's basically Electabuzz but worse. Against Lance, it's obvious why Magmar just doesn't work. It has Thunder Punch, but I don't think that even one-shots the Gyarados. I think it can with a Magnet, but even then, like, you don't want to switch this thing on a Dragon Dance, and yeah, it's just not that good. The one good thing about Magmar is that it gives you arguably the easiest rival fight to deal with. Oh, I will say, one good thing about Magmar is that it is absolutely insanely good against the main game champion fight. Magmar literally takes out the champion's first 3 to 5 mons. 5 mons if you're lucky, because it one-shots guaranteed the Heracross, baits in Walrein, which does not have a water move for some reason, so Magmar beats that. Metagross comes in with Explosion, and Magmar can outspeed and one-shot that. Then Houndoom comes in, and Magmar can two-shot that with Brick Break, leaving the champion with only 2 mons. So yeah, Magmar can make the champion fight free. In main game. Not in post game. The post game champion can actually counter Magmar, and it doesn't really work there. In post game Elite Four, I used Magmar and it didn't really do anything, unfortunately, but it's still a very powerful mon. You can manipulate to have perfect IVs and modest nature. It's just nowhere near as good as the other two. Honestly, you could even make an argument for it being A tier. It's kind of a shame, but it's still a good mon. Pinsir, I've literally never used this. You get this in Safari Zone, but it's Scizor but way worse. C tier, because by the time you get it, you're not using it anywhere. The only time I could see someone use this is to counter a Jinx somehow. It's more of a check than it's a check, not a counter. That's it. Tauros, extremely hard to get, has Intimidate. You get it later on, but it's still a solid mon. Really good speed, Intimidate, good attack. But yeah, you get it later on. Gyarados, this thing is probably S-, maybe A to S-, I would say. Actually, I would say E tier. I would say. You could say S- purely because you get it so early on in the game, and it's good for the second gym leader and for lots and lots of other boss fights. Good stats, Intimidate. It's not a surprise why Gyarados is such a good mon. With the awful moveset is the only thing that kind of holds it back, so you could make an argument for A tier. It's good, but you don't actually need it that much. You could bring it to Elite Four, but you don't actually need it for Elite Four that much, really. I just bring other mons instead of it, really. So I put it in E tier. I think Gengar's is better, but it's still a really good mon, nothing to complain about. Lapras, you know Lapras. Very, very good. Very good stats, great special wall. Surf, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Perish Song, it can get Water Absorb or Shell Armor, which is incredibly good. It's somewhat like Snorlax a little bit. Its defensive typing isn't the best, there will be a lot of like rock and fighting type which can deal a lot of damage to it. But it's still very solid. It's really good against Koga, it makes Koga almost free. An otherwise difficult Koga fight becomes pretty much free with Lapras. So very good. I really like this thing. I don't know if it's as good as the other S- mons, but it's a mon that you can literally guarantee in every run. I really like it. The coverage is insane. This can destroy other water types. I really like it. Bulky water type with Thunderbolts. And Ice Beam destroys dragon types. Really nice. We're getting towards the end of Gen 1. Ditto, trash tier, no need to explain. Vaporeon, I've never used Vaporeon. I'll put Vaporeon in maybe A tier. It's a good mon in its own right. Sure. Yeah, it gets Wish, good HP, good special bulk. Surf and Ice Beam. But why would you use this over Lapras, which is guaranteed? And why would you get Vaporeon over a guaranteed Scizor, or even in Alakazam, which you can get in Celadon City? That's the bad thing about it, really. It's just yet another good water type. Jolteon, I think Jolteon could be A tier. Really fast electro type. It's Electrode, but noticeably stronger. Has more power. Still, why would you ever use Jolteon over Scizor, which you can get? And why would you ever use Jolteon over Electabuzz? Now, I think Electabuzz is probably my favourite starter, so this is my go-to. If you're picking Magmar, okay, I guess you could make an argument for Jolteon, but if you have Electabuzz, why would you ever use Jolteon over a much better electric type right here? Still a good mon for sure. It can counter all the Crobats and such, but yeah, it's good, but it's not really needed. Flareon, oh, this might actually be even more. Actually, no, this is better than Rapidash. It gets strong Shadow Ball, but the thing is, Flareon has a much bigger opportunity cost because you're foregoing a Scizor. So yeah, silly mon. Lord Helix is a good mon, but by the time you get it, do you even need it? You get this way too late. With Shell Armor, it's actually really funny, but you just don't need it that much, really. Kabutops, not very good. It's Omastar at home. It's Omastar but more aggressive, but its special attack is lower and it doesn't have any good physical moves apart from Rock Slide, but that's unreliable and it's not even that fast. Aerodactyl, I think, is the best fossil. E tier. This is very good for Elite Four. Very good. With Electabuzz as your starter, Aerodactyl is probably my go-to lead. I believe you can use it against Agatha, and you could actually use it for a pivot against Bruno as well, and you can use it against Lance also to beat the Charizard. The only problem is that Aerodactyl has really bad moveset. Its reliable stab moves are Ancient Power and a Wing Attack, both 60 base power, which is lame. It's super fast and has good physical attack. You can give it Rock Slide and Fly, but they're not reliable. However, if you pick Electabuzz, Aerodactyl is still a very good mon, because it outspeeds and guarantees a one-shot on the Champion's Heracross. Based on Jinx, which is the strongest mon, the hardest mon in the whole game to counter, you outspeed it, you go for Ancient Power, and you can almost one-shot it. I think with a Hard Rock and good attack, you can actually just outspeed and one-shot the Jinx, which is absolutely incredible if you do that, making it one of the very few literal guaranteed counters to the rival's Jinx. If you go for Rock Slide, I think you're almost literally guaranteed to one-shot it, but you can miss that, and there's no wide lens in this game. You can also get an Ancient Power boost, but even if Aerodactyl goes down against a Champion's Jinx, which is so hard to beat, it will literally be in the red, and I think the rival will be forced to use Full Restore, so you can switch in another mon, and you basically have 2 turns to take it out. So you can switch in Electabuzz, Fire Punch it, or you could like Magnet Thunderbolt or maybe Volt Tackle, whatever you need to 2-hit KO, you just guarantee counter it with Electabuzz, really. It just takes the hardest mon out of the fight. Even if you lose Aerodactyl, it still makes the champion so much easier. And I believe you can use it in post-game as well, because the rival has Flareon as the lead, and Aerodactyl can hard counter that and bait out Jinx again, the level 99 post-game Jinx. But yeah, Aerodactyl is good for that reason. And it's also good for the penultimate rival fight. Beats Crobat as well. And it's good for Agatha's Crobat as well. Pretty solid. Snorlax, this thing is S- or S. I think S-. But it's probably the best S- mon. These are not ordered, but I'll put it here anyways. You know what Snorlax is. The reality is, Gen 3 with the lack of physical special split, special moves are king in this game. Special moves are the best. Surf, Ice Beam, especially water types, Surf and Ice Beam and Thunderbolt and Psychic, those moves just dominate the meta. Special coverage is too good. It really is. And that's why Snorlax is just incredible, especially with Thick Vat. You don't even need Thick Vat, but it just makes it that much better. It's basically Blissey Light, but it can deal a lot more damage. It gets Yawn, you can give it Leftovers, it gets Rest by level up, so you don't have to waste a TM on it. You can give it Protect as well. I like to give it Body Slam and Shadow Ball, and with Shadow Ball it can take out most of the ghost types. With Badge Boost and good special defense IVs, it basically invalidates certain Jinx sets. Well, not Jinx, Gengar I mean. Jinx, Snorlax is one of the few semi-counters of Jinx. It's not a true counter, but it can somewhat take it on. You can switch in on Ice Beam, take the hit somewhat okay-ish, use Shadow Ball and deal a lot of damage. You could even use Sleep Talk to hit it while you're sleeping, I guess. You can use Rest to heal yourself up. It can wall out Lorelai's Lapras, for example. Really good against Sabrina as well. You can take it to all the rival fights. Just a very good special wall. I really like it. You know how good this is, really. Finally, the legendaries. Now, these, I'm going to assume you are allowing legendaries in your Nuzlocke. Articuno, I don't think is particularly good. I mean, end of the day, Articuno, I'll put it in A or S minus. You get this later on. You could use this against Elite Four. In post-game, Articuno doesn't work because Lance's team is souped up and he doesn't even have that many dragon types. He's only got 3 dragon types in post-game. In main game, you could use it, but then again, I feel like Starmie and Electabuzz do its job so much better. Even Jinx. Jinx is just Articuno but better. Articuno's still okay, but I just don't. It's a legendary, but I see other mons they're just better, really. Same with Zapdos. Good mon, obviously, but Electabuzz is better. It's Electabuzz without the speed and without the coverage. Electabuzz would be way worse if it only had Thunderbolt and nothing else. The typing is good, but it also makes it susceptible to ice moves, for example, which Electabuzz is not. It doesn't even have Volt Absorb. And it doesn't really have any good flying attacks. Like, yeah, Drill Peck, but like, you don't want to use this against Machamp because it's just going to hit you with a critical hit Rock Slide and destroy you. Moltres, it's Charizard but better. Really good stats, I guess, which makes up for it being Charizard but better. But I don't see you. It's kind of like Magmar. Like, yeah, it's good, but it's the worst of the bunch. Bad typing, really. Dragonite. This is another A tier mon. Very good stats, very bulky. Very high attack. The only thing that's holding Dragonite back is its move pool is awful. Special moves. It's got some really good special move. Dragon Claw, which is best special attack. It's Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Flamethrower, Surf. But how are you using that 135 physical attack? Wing Attack, which is 60 base power, okay. Fly is 90 base power, which is excellent. And you could use that with Leftovers for extra recovery, but you got 5% chance of missing. You probably don't want to risk that. You know there is no wide lines in this game. So yeah, I feel like this is kind of a worse version of Salamence, because Salamence is faster and can actually take advantage of its special attack in addition to its physical attack. And Intimidate makes it way bulkier and is really good for pivoting. I feel Salamence is just better, really. Dragonite is still good, obviously. Dratini, which you can basically guarantee, you can trade it for Perfect IV Tyranitar, and that I feel is just as good. But because the Tyranitar that you get in a trade has guaranteed lonely nature with great IVs, you probably want to get that instead. Still solid, I guess. Just wish I had a better mood pool. And with that, we're on to Gen 2. Mewtwo I will not allow. Mew is only available in post-game, so I'm assuming you're probably not going to use that anyway. So you could use this in a Nuzlocke if you... I'm assuming you are doing post-game. You could use this if you want, but I wouldn't allow it because no one else in this game uses legendaries. I mean, I guess there's the legendary birds, but, you know, whatever. Okay, so, yeah, I spent 1 hour doing all of Gen 2, and I was really happy with it. Then I accidentally deleted the footage. Oh, I was so salty over that. I'm so annoyed that I wasted all of that time, so I have to do Gen 2 all over again. Then do all of Gen 3. So, let's get over this. At least now I kind of know where most of my rankings are, and I'm going to try and make this a little bit more fast-paced. Skarmory, this honestly, I'll probably put this in B tier. The reason why is, yes, Skarmory is usually almost always an amazing mon. The thing is, in this game, Skarmory is like really hard to get. I think the only place you can actually get a Skarmory is like maybe post-game or like somewhere late game, and that's it. And Skarmory honestly doesn't do much. Like, it completely rolls grass types, which is fine for the champion's grass type, which he always has, but that's basically it. Almost everything in Elite Four is a special attacking mon, which Skarmory just does not work against. Skarmory, it can be a good wall, but it doesn't do much in return. It's strong against grass and bug types, but by the time you get it, you're barely going to be seeing any anyways, And even some of the physical attackers in Elite Four, like Dragon Dance Gyarados and Machamp, Skarmory doesn't really damage them that much, and Skarmory can still get destroyed by like a cross-chop crit. So that's kind of it pretty much. Lantern, this I will put in B tier also, because honestly this is a Pokemon Lantern that I've never used in this game. I think you can only get it at select routes and you usually have to forgo other Pokemon to get it. It doesn't get Volt Absorb. If it did get Volt Absorb, it would be much better. Honestly, this could potentially be A-, because it still does counter a lot of water types, but you're going to have other mons that do that anyways, like Electabuzz, which is your starter. I feel like Lantern is yet another Pokemon where it falls under the category of just being Electabuzz at home. You're just going to have other mons that does its job better, and you're just never going to need it, pretty much. Corsola, this is also probably a B tier. Actually, I think this is less. This is like a C tier mon. You get this late on in the game, and by the time you get it, there's nothing you will need it for. Like, absolutely nothing. Almost every threat will just hit it super effectively, and Corsola just doesn't do any damage in return, and its abilities don't really do anything. I mean, Natural Cure is like whatever. It just doesn't do anything. It's probably like the worst rock type in the game, actually, now that I think about it. And it's not a good rock type, it's not a good water type. Easy. Smeargle, there's no need to explain Smeargle. You know what the deal is with Smeargle, is trash tier, nothing more to say. Same with Delibird. I don't think it gets any ice moves in this game. It literally just uses Present. So, and it's got like really bad... It's Articuno, but ridiculously worse, and Articuno isn't even that good. So yeah. Dunsparce, C tier. The only reason it's not D tier is because you can get this in Diglett Cave and like, you can get some use out of it. You can give it Dig and use it against Lieutenant Surge, but like, I don't know why you would just give that to Marshtomp instead. You can give it Secret Power and maybe use it against Misty or like Rival and SSN. Even then, it's not very good. But the fact that you get it early and its stats are okay for like Gym 2, it becomes trash afterwards, but well, at least it can do something. Unknown. This Pokemon is only available in post-game, and you're not using Unknown. Ledian, this is also D tier. Ledian's absolute garbage. I don't think you can even get Ledian in early game, which is the only point you would actually use it, and even then, it doesn't actually do anything in early game either. Like, there aren't any grass types that are threats in early game. It doesn't do anything against Misty, it's got no attacking moves to speak of, like Tackle, I guess. Like, you just don't need this. Like, even against Erica, this doesn't work. So it's a bug flying type that isn't even good at taking on grass types. It's just awful. Murkrow. This thing is C tier. Honestly, I could make an argument for this being D tier. Yeah, you know what? I'll put this in D tier. Dark Flying. It's got below average stats. Dark type is good, because there's a lot of Psychic types in this game, and quite a few Ghost types, but the thing is, most of those Psychic types like Gardevoir, Alakazam, Gengar, they also have Electric type coverage. So, Murkrow's absolutely not countering them, and Murkrow does not have any good moves of its own. It's, at best, it's two-shotting some Ghost and Psychic types, and even then I'm not even sure. You could use it against like Sabrina. Even against Sabrina, this is probably the worst Dark type you could possibly use. Even stuff like Mycheno is better because that flying type. So it's just pretty much useless, and you only get it like late in the game anyways. I think maybe it's like only in post game, so yeah, it's garbage. Ridos, awful. Bad stats, awful moveset. The moveset is what really kills it. This thing's strongest move is like flipping acid or something. I don't think it even gets like Silver Wind, right? It's just awful. I don't even know when you get this. This is yet another mon. There's so many garbage Gen 2 mons which you will just never encounter in your run. But even if I did, there's no way I'm using Ariados. Even if it gets Misty, it wouldn't do anything. It's just too bad, really. Apom. This is another garbage mon. God, there's a lot of D tiers. Actually, I took these all off in order, which is kind of why. I had to take them all from S tier to D tier, so I'm going through all the D tier mons now, and as you can see, they get better and better as they progress. Apom is a normal type, is probably the worst mono normal. Even Furret is better than it, and that is saying something. And the fact that you get this late on. Is it any wonder why this thing's in the bottom tier? Okay, now we're onto the C tier mons. Actually, this is really convenient because I know where my rankings are, so it makes me able to go through this faster. Azumarill, I'll probably put this in C tier, just because it's an Azumarill. It's pretty garbage in this game, and I think you could, the earliest you can get this is like, I think Safari Zone or something. And at which point it's just such a mediocre water type. It's got solid bulk. It's got good attack with huge power, though it has no good moves to use. I think it has like Brick Break and like Strength in Double Edge. You're never using TM Return on Azumarill, so its physical moveset isn't great. Special moveset, it's only got 60 special attack, and yeah, bulky water is good. I guess with Thick Fat you could use it against fire types like Blaine, but like that's like one use for it. And you could maybe use it to beat other water types, but by the time you get it, like, you're going to have something better. I just don't see it doing anything. This isn't like, this is pre-Gen 4 Azumarill, so it's obviously not very good. Togetic, also C tier. I don't even know how you get Togetic in this game. I don't think I've ever gotten it. But it's better than the D tier mons at least. It has good status moves and healing moves, and you can maybe abuse Serene Grace. It's a flying type, so you can do some pivots. It's still a really bad mon. But Stantler, this is also pretty bad, but at the very least it's got Intimidate, and it gets Shadow Ball, so you could use it to fight psychic types. And it can deal some damage with Stab Strength. At least Stantler has a good stab move, which is more than I can say for most everything in D tier, really, which is actually crazy. Yeah, Intimidate kind of saves it. It's better than like, it's not the worst mono normal, it's way better than Apom and Lickitung, and it's better than like Furret, I guess. But yeah, you could maybe use it to counter some of the Dragon Dancers. Like, you can sack it against a final Giovanni fight which has Dragon Dance Tyranitar, because the Intimidate will kind of like negate the Dragon Dance and you like bait out a move, I guess. Speaking of bad mono normals, Porygon does have solid stats, and it's got Trace, which might actually be useful in some cases. You Trace, Flash Fire, or Intimidate. And it does have good coverage, but it's just a mon that you will never use. To get this, you have to sacrifice your Celadon City encounter, and I don't know why you would do that. Also, like, it doesn't have any stab moves to speak of, so it's just so awkward to use. It's slow, it's got bulk, but it's not that bulky. It doesn't really wall anything that hard. Octillery, yet another C tier. It's yet another one of those water types. It's like, yeah, you can do some stuff. It has good coverage, Flame Force, Surf, Ice Beam. I think it might get some other moves too. Maybe Giga Drain, but like, why would you use this over something else? This Pokemon has got good attacking stats, but it's slow, and it's not that bulky. Usually Pokemon, you need to have, like, I just feel like it doesn't do anything. It can hit somewhat hard, and it's not even that strong. It just gets outsped in 2-shot. A lot of mons will just flat out one-shot it. Blastoise can literally do like the same thing but better, and Blastoise isn't even that great. Golduck is better because at least that can outspeed something. Yeah, it's no wonder Octillery is this bad. Mantine now. The reason why Mantine is in C tier, now Mantine's actually not a bad mon. It's kind of like Gyarados, like good typing, and it's got really good stats. It can special wall so much, and this is a game where special attacks are dominant. The reason why Mantine's here is because you literally cannot get it in main game. You can only get Mantine in post game, which is really dumb. So yeah, it would definitely be higher. If you can get Mantine early on, oh, it would definitely be higher up on this list, but by the time you get Mantine, what are you possibly doing it? Honestly, the reason why Mantine's not D tier is because you could potentially use it for the Elite Four rematch. Its stats are actually good enough. Its stats, typing, and moveset, and I think it gets Water Absorb, which is pretty cool. It actually can do quite a few things. It still gets a water coverage. It doesn't die to grass types. It's only weak to rock and electric. It takes special hits really well. So it's still a decent mon, really. Octillery, this is another C tier because it's really hard to get, and this thing literally does nothing. It has no physical moves that are good. It gets TM Sludge Bomb, which you have to use in post game, and like, yeah, you're not doing that. Serpent Ice Beam, but its special attack is awful. Intimidate is its saving grace, stopping it from being in D tier, I guess. But I don't even know how you're getting Quillfish in the first place. It's just yet another mon that you'll just never use. There's a million better options. Same with Jumpluff. Jumpluff's awful. It just sucks. Like, it doesn't do any damage. It's got a little bit of bulk. It's fast. The one saving grace of Jumpluff is that it's fast and has some status moves. I was able to use this once against Game Corner Giovanni in one run, and it was able to actually beat the Kangaskhan. So that was it. Because it outsped Kangaskhan, switched in on Earthquake, then it Leech Seeded, then it proceeded to Stun Spore, and heal itself up and manage to stall at the Kangaskhan. Stuff like that, which is pretty hard to do, is like means that okay, Jumpluff at least has some use. It's still pretty bad, but I don't know, you can maybe use it in like one major fight if you really wanted to. Noctowl, this thing also was really bad. You can get it very early on in the game. I think it's at Route 3. You can use it for Misty, and that's pretty much it. I don't think you'll be using it anywhere else. Even against Misty, it's not even that good. Honestly, I think this might actually be a D tier mon, really. Yeah, you know what? This probably is a D tier mon. It's a special attacker, but has no special attacks. Its physical attack is awful. It's got good special bulk, I guess, and Compound Ice Hypnosis. Okay, I could boost in C tier purely because this can be really good against Nugget Bridge Rival. If they're using Maccabee, but that's it. Otherwise, it's just D tier. Like, where are you ever going to use a Noctowl? What, you're going to use Peck with base 50 attack? Yeah, right. Even against Erica, it just doesn't do the damage. And stuff like Vileplume actually beats its 1v1 with Sludge Bomb. It's just bad. Speaking of bad, we have Shuckle. Honestly, Shuckle I might actually put higher up. I'm trying to think. It's a rock type. I feel Shuckle is good for the Giovanni fight in Game Corner and maybe the one in Silphcoat, and that's literally it. You have to get this at Rock Tunnel. It's good for taking normal moves, and that's it. It basically sucks at everything else. You could try to do Toxic Stall shenanigans, but Toxic Stall with Rest, but Shuckle isn't even that bulky compared to something like a Snorlax or other mons that does this job but better. In so many mons have water coverage. There's a lot of water types in this game. Things like Jinx, for example, can destroy us. Even like the rival's Houndoom, for example, can start roasting this with fire moves. It's not going to do anything. It's not a good stall mon. It can't attack for its life. It can take hits from Kangaskhan and maybe like deal some damage to it or try to like debuff it a bit. So that's basically its only use. For it, this thing is really bad. The only reason this isn't D tier is because you can get this before Misty, and yeah, for it can do. Its stats are solid for that point of the game. You could give it secret power. I mean, you'd give it to Gyarados instead, but like still, yeah, it becomes garbage after Gym 3, but at least you can get something out of it. Sneasel, honestly, Sneasel, I might put in B tier. It's kind of weird. The reason why I think Sneasel's actually not bad for the point you get it is because it is actually a really good mon for Sabrina, which is one of the hardest fights in the game. It's a fast mon, and yes, its special moveset is garbage. Actually, it's probably more like the top of C tier, if I've got to be honest. Actually, you could make an argument for B tier. Weavile, its special moveset is awful. Like, it has like Faint Attack and Ice Beam, but with that special attack you're not using it. It has Shadow Ball and really good speed, so with good IVs you can use it against Sabrina. The problem is her mons also, I think they might have fire coverage too, so you need to be, this doesn't even work that well. You can actually use, actually I'll put this in B tier purely because you can actually use this as a somewhat semi-Jinx answer. It's not a very good one, but you can use it against Jinx. It's immune to Psychic obviously, and it can take maybe 2 Ice Beams, and it could probably outspeed and hit it pretty hard with Shadow Ball. So yeah, you can kind of use this against Jinx and Sabrina. So it actually has a use, which is more than I can say about all the mons below it. Same with Piloswine. Like, what's Piloswine doing? To be fair, Piloswine being a ground type automatically makes it okay, especially if it's got thick fat. It's got pretty solid physical stats, so you can use it against like Giovanni 1. I think the main use for this is against a rival, because a rival always has an electric type, either Ampharos or Electabuzz, and you can use Piloswine. That's literally it. You're not using Piloswine in any other fight, but at least you can take it to those major boss fights. Ampharos does have Fire Punch, I believe, and I don't think Piloswine will outspeed, so you will have to take one Fire Punch. And like, I mean, you're going to use Swampert instead, but I guess if Piloswine is like thick fat, you can like take a hit. In Electabuzz, which the rival has, if you pick Magby, has Cross Chop, which will just take you out with a crit, so yeah, Piloswine doesn't even do that well, but at least you can take this to major boss fights. Politoed, C tier. It's got solid stats, and yeah, water typing is nice. It's better than like Octillery, I guess. And you can maybe do some Perish Song strats, but that's literally it. It's just another bog standard water type. It's got solid special stats. It doesn't do anything apart from like Surf and Ice Beam in like Perish Song, I guess. It's not particularly fast. It can take some special hits well, but it doesn't bowl out too much apart from other water types, which you'll have better answers for. It's just so unremarkable, I guess. It's kind of, I mean, in some ways it might be better than Blastoise, but in other ways it's worse. It's actually pretty similar to Blastoise, I would say. Sudowoodo also in B tier because it's just another rock type that has good defense. So you can use this to beat normal and flying types. You can use this against Kangaskhans and Persians and Crobats, which you will be fighting throughout the game. The only thing is, I think Sudowoodo you get to like really late on, but at least it can do something. Magcargo. Same with Magcargo, really, the same exact logic. You only get access to Magcargo after Erica. Now, Magcargo actually got a pretty saucy buff. It got something like plus 10 to all of its stats, then an extra plus 30 to its special attack. And yeah, you can use it against Crobats, really, which you will be fighting. You can't use it against a Kangaskhan, because I think the Kangaskhan has Earthquake. You can use it against Persian, I guess. It's got one or two uses, and you can use it against Blaine, actually. So yeah, Magcargo's got, I think it's got Recover, Yawn, and Flamethrower, Rock Slide. Yeah, some use, really. Not the worst thing. Same with Gliscor. Gliscor might actually be like the worst ground type in a game. Oh, Gligar, not Gliscor. It's Gliscor but awful. Like, its special defense means it just can't take any hits. Like, this can probably beat the rival's Ampharos. Maybe. You'll outspeed it and you could hit it with Earthquake. I don't know if this actually gets Earthquake by level up. You can use Dig. You do need to take Fire Punches though, which this might get destroyed by crit. This does not counter the rival's Electabuzz because that thing is Ice Punch. So yeah, this is like, it's still a ground type, but it's like the worst ground type, which is why it's the lowest one. It might actually be worse than Piloswine. Hitmontop, B tier. This thing is really hard to get because you have to get the Giftmon, then pray that it's got the right IVs to evolve into Hitmontop. But Intimidate kind of saves it from being really bad. Intimidate plus a fighting type with decent defense. So it's good against Kangaskhans and Persians, and the final Tyranitar that Gym 8 has, it has those uses, same as other fighting types. It's probably like on par with Hitmonlee, I'd say, in viability. I'd say it's better than Hitmonlee purely because Intimidate. That's actually pretty solid, good bulk. Ursaring, this is just another B tier mon, really. It's just another middle of the road mon. It's a solid, for a mono normal type, is way better than Furret and Linoon and such. But it's got really high attack, and you can give it Brick Break and Strength. But it's slow, it won't outspeed anything, and it's got okayish bulk, but it's not that good. It's not a wall. It's just a really strong attacker, but it doesn't do much else. At best, you can maybe take out one mon, and that's it. It can't sweep like other mons. It's kind of unfortunate, so it's just mediocre at best, really. Miltank is better. Miltank has much more speed and is thick fat. It's got pretty good physical defense. And what makes Miltank good is that you can get the mill tank from Cinnabar Island in a trade, and that mill tank is actually pretty solid because that mill tank has got guaranteed adamant nature, and it's got pretty good above average IV, so you know it's going to be a good mill tank with good stats. It's always got thick fat, and you can give it Shadow Ball, you can give it, I think it gets Body Slam, which is pretty solid. It gets Milk Drink to heal itself up, so it's much better than Ursaring, really. Good stats, good ability, decent moves. This is probably like, actually you could make an argument for A-. The only thing is that you get mill tank somewhat late in the game, so by that point you don't really need it anymore, but you could actually use this for like E4 maybe, or maybe like post game E4. It's just not, it's a solid mon, but it's not something that you desperately need really, because mono normal is just such an awkward type because it doesn't really wall anything that well. But yeah, it's not a bad mod. It's probably like the upper end of B tier. For Alligator, this thing deserves to be an A-, so now we're going up to A- here. For Alligator is not so bad. It's yet another mono normal, but I think the really good physical attack and defense kind of sets for Alligator apart, which is pretty useful. It can fire off really strong brick breaks and TM digs, which is really useful against all the Giovanni fights, and it can counter like other water types like Dugongs, for example, and ice types. Like dig and brick break is pretty useful coverage. And you still have Surf and Ice Beam, so it can actually do things. You could maybe actually use it for Elite 4 if you really wanted to. That'd be pretty awkward, but you could. It's not amazing or anything, but it's actually a solid mod just because it's got good stats and moveset, really. NT, oh, now this is A-. You would think this would be higher, but Mono Fires, what are you doing with a Mono Fire mod? And yeah, it's a legendary, but it's not that fast. Its physical attack doesn't really do anything. It's got secret power in dig, I think, and that's it. Which isn't very useful. By the time you get this, you will be at the Elite 4, and you're not going to get any use out of it. And you're just going to be using Flamethrower, but its special attack isn't even that high. I'm pretty sure it's less than, like, Charizard and such. And Charizard isn't even a good mon. So, yeah. It's probably the worst legendary in the game. I don't know, I say it is the worst legendary, really. Granbull. This could be A-. This is actually pretty good, honestly. You can get this early on. Intimidate is actually really nice on Granbull. It makes it really good for all the fights, like the Tyranitar and such, and countering all the mons that like to raise their attack. Good physical stats, and has Brick Break, which is pretty strong to beat other normal types. And you can trade this for the mill tank at Cinnabar Island, so once you get your use out of Granbull, you can trade it. Granbull is actually pretty good for Gym 8 to counter Tyranitar. So this is a solid mon, really. Yanma, you would think Yanma would be absolute trash, but surprisingly, this is like an A- mon. The reason why is because Yanma, I think it got like plus 10 or plus 20 to all of its stats. It gets speed boost or compound eyes. Compound eyes, the only thing it does is it makes it so Hypnosis is really accurate. And speed boost makes it so after one turn, it has infinite speed, pretty much. But it's really fast anyway, so it doesn't even need it that much. I've actually gotten some use out of Yanmega. Its stats are not so bad anymore. And it has a wing attack in Silverwind. This actually gets some use later on. You could use this as like an emergency check against Jinx, because it can switch in, outspeed. Like once something gets KO'd, for example, or sacked, you can switch this in, KO the Jinx, and outspeed it. It's also pretty good for the rival fight. It's good for the champion, actually. This is actually pretty good for the champion because it could potentially take out the lead Heracross, and it can also take out the grass type that the champion will have, and you can also use it to potentially revenge kill the Jinx. So it has use. It's also pretty good for Sabrina because this could potentially outspeed most of her team and fire off Silver Winds, which will deal a lot of damage. So it has uses there in key fights. You're not going to use it that often, but when you do use it, it's in really important fights, and it can actually do something, surprisingly. So yeah, this gets some recognition at least. And for us, A-, you can get this at the very start of the game. Mono Electric, it is power crept by Electabuzz, but it still has good stats, and you can use it to counter the Crobats and such. It's kind of unremarkable, really, but it still has some use because it does have good stats, really. Blissey. Oh, yikes. Oh. Yeah, you know where Blissey... There's like no debate here that Blissey is like top of the top. It really is like S tier. It's Snorlax on steroids, I feel. It just walls everything. It really does. Actually, you could make an argument for being S-. You could actually make an argument for it being S-, because it's probably not as good as Stormy. The limitation that Blissey has is you have to use it against special attackers, but actually, most of the special attackers in the Elite Four do have alternate ways of beating Blissey. For example, Agatha special attackers, Mischievous and Jinx, they have Perish Song, Mean Look, and Destiny Bond. And her Hypno can use Calm Mind, which Blissey is not going to be able to beat in time. So Hypno with +6 Calm Mind will start damaging the Blissey. So Blissey isn't actually... It doesn't counter that many things. It's good against, like, for example, Lance in Elite Four rematch, where he's got Mystic Water Kingdra. Yeah, not every special attacker is going to be completely destroyed by Blissey. Some mons, for example, can put to sleep and set up on it. But the fact that you can guarantee this, and it does work against a lot of mons, means that it is an incredible mon. Even if it only beats, like, let's say, 2/3 of special attackers, that's still like 40% of the whole game getting invalidated by this, so it's still a really good mon, and it's hard to go wrong with it. I mean, there's a reason why this mon is bad, and you can actually guarantee this 100% in this game. But a Toxic Stall set with, like, Rest or Soft Boiled is pretty good. You could actually give it special attacks, because special attacks that is not awful. This thing just works, really. Wobbuffet. I don't know Wobbuffet. I think Wobbuffet should be an A tier. I've never actually caught this thing, but the mere fact it's a Wobbuffet means it at least has some use. Because you can use this to guarantee counter certain mons. Like, probably leads. It is pretty spicy, actually. I'd probably put more on A- because it's... You need to really know what you're doing to use this mon. You need to, like... It's really hard to switch this in, take a hit, then counter, and pray that you took enough damage to KO it. But being able to guarantee you take out a lot of leads is pretty cool. Even then, it actually doesn't work, because a lot of leads, now that I think about it, like... Agatha, for example, Lance, they could potentially just beat your Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet doesn't even work actually that well. Actually, no, this is a B tier mon. It's so hard to use, really, because I don't think it's that good. Heracross, this is probably A-. Good fighting type, beats a lot of rock and normal types. It walls grass types. That's pretty much it. Which just moveset was better. I think it does get Mega Horn, which is cool. But yeah. Mischievous, this is basically Gengar but worse. But it's still kind of solid. Really good at pivoting. It gets Thunderbolt. Levitate is cool. It gets status moves. It's fast. Decent special bulk. It's basically, it's Gengar but worse. Less coverage. This is also pretty hard to get. I think you can only get it in... I think you can get it in like... in post game it's pretty easy to get. But in main game I think you only get it Lavender Tower, and that's it, really. Umbreon, I would say this is an A tier mon, because Dark type with really good special defense. Synchronize, it can heal itself up. You can like potentially spam Sand Attack and heal yourself up. Stall outs. Really good stats. This is just a generically good mon. You could use it against Sabrina and all the Jinxes, and you can use it against Ghost types. It's definitely not S tier. It's not that good. It is another one of those like passive walls where it takes hits really well, but it doesn't do much in return. So yeah, it's a bit hard to use. Fortress, I think this is another A-. You would think Fortress would be amazing because it does resist Jinx's dual stab and really good typing, but it doesn't do anything in return. This thing has no good attacking moves. Its only good move is like Secret Power and Dig. It can't heal itself up, it doesn't do any status. It walls certain mons like the normal types. And that's it. And its special defense is low enough to where like it's not even a good Jinx counter. Jinx can just destroy this with a crit. And Ghost and Psychic types actually have fire coverage like Fire Punch, so it doesn't even work against it. But it is really good at countering some mons like Crobat for sure. It's a mon that you would think would be better than it actually is, which is kind of unfortunate. In Emerald Kaizo, the thing's absolutely insane, but this is an Emerald Kaizo, obviously. Crobat is also an A- mon. I think Crobat is actually pretty solid. You don't use it in that many fights, but when you do use it, it's actually quite impactful. It's just a generically good mon. Good typing, really fast. Able to pivot pretty well. It's really good for the rival fight because it's really good for the champion. You can lead it off, take out the Heracross, then bring it back in to destroy the Grass Starter. And you could potentially use it to sack or revenge kill something else. So it's really good for the champion fight in main game. Not so much for post game, because there's no Heracross lead. It's really good against Erica. It can maybe use against one or two other fights. I wish I had stronger moves though. It gets Fly, but it's not 100% accurate. 90 base power Fly is pretty cool. I think A- is a pretty fair tier to put it in, because it also evolves really early, and you will be getting use out of it. Tyranitar, okay, this thing is definitely going up there. This thing goes in S-. Like, it's pretty obvious. Pseudo legendary, that's a rock type. The reason why this is not so... This Tyranitar, you can actually guarantee this in a trade. You can guarantee this next to Vermilion City. You get given a lonely Tyranitar with above average IVs, which is pretty cool. So you know it's always got good stats. The one thing that's holding back Tyranitar, I mean, a few things. Sandstream is not great. Sandstream probably hurts you more than it does the opponent, because stall strats are really good, especially at the Elite Four main game and post game. You want to be using stall strats. In Sandstream, it doesn't invalidate, but it just hinders your own ability to stall. In like the chip damage, your opponent usually doesn't matter, because either you'll be stalling them out anyways, or you'll just be one-shotting them. You don't need that extra chip damage, so that chip damage is just hurting you, really. In Tyranitar, it's 4 times weak to fighting, which there's a few fighting types, like Electabuzz. In this thing, it can be a good Jinx answer, but the biggest problem with Tyranitar is it needs better moves, really. It's got Earthquake, which it learns by level up, a 100 base power move, it's great. Crunch was fine, but it's a special move, really. In, like, Rock Slide, that's like the only good rock moves it gets, and it's got a 10% chance to miss. If this misses Jinx, it probably just loses to it, really. 10% chance to miss its best move, it's not that good. It's only 75 base power anyways, which isn't even that much stronger than Earthquake. If this thing had better moves, it would absolutely be S tier, but I think this is fair for it, really. Yeah, Gen 3 really screwed over a lot of mons. Hell, even Crunch would have been awesome. Slowking, it's kind of like Slowbro, but worse, honestly. Yeah, I definitely feel like this thing is Slowbro, but worse. Because Slowbro is really good against physical attackers. Actually, I'll say it's about the same as Slowbro. You can use this against like Magmar, which the rival could have. It could probably take like a crit Thunder Punch, depending on its IVs. You can use it against Blaine. There are some times when the special bulk is actually much better than the physical. Maybe against Lorelei, but I just don't really see where you would use a Slowking, really. I've never used it. You're just going to be using the water types up here, really. It's not awful, but I could see it do some things, really. Meganium, this thing's actually kind of solid, really. I think this could be E tier. It becomes garbage later on, but the only reason why is because you get this really early on. You get this before Misty. It's really good against Misty. It's also pretty good against Lieutenant Surge. It's also pretty good against Sabrina. It's really good for free gym fights. And that alone makes it pretty solid. It's also decent for Giovanni 1 against a Kangaskhan, because you can kind of like heal up and take some of the damage. This could potentially counter the Starmie on Misty's team, which is really hard to counter. It's a guaranteed mon. You can use Synthesis and Magical Leaf. It actually gets a decent grass move, which is kind of surprising. You can also just tank hits her on Lieutenant Surge and like keep spamming Synthesis, which is really nice. And it can also wall out Erica's Ludicolo with Synthesis too, which is pretty useful. You're not going to be using it after that, but being able to carry you on 2 of the hardest fights of the game automatically makes it pretty solid, with the fact that it's a guaranteed mon that you'll get every single run. Quagsire. This is A tier just because it's a water ground type. It is basically a worse version of Swampert, which we will be getting into later on. It's a worse version of Swampert and you only get this late on. But water ground is very good. This can counter Ampharos in Electabuzz in basically every fight, and you can take this to all the way to Elite Four. The thing is, I feel like this is just a worse version of Swampert, and we will be getting into Swampert, but still kind of useful, really. Water Absorb is pretty nice, I mean you can use against Lorelei in other fights too. That's kind of it. I put A tier purely because it's good for every single rival fight. But once we go to Wishcash and Swampert, we'll be talking more about water ground types. Houndoom, oh my god. S tier. This thing is S tier, really. I think this mon is so good, it's actually worth resetting for it. If you're picking Elekid as your starter and your rival will have Jinx. The reason why Houndoom is so good, it's literally like the second mon you get in the game. You get at the very beginning of the game, and you'll be using this throughout the game. It counters every single rival fight. You use it against Smoochum or Jinx. Every single one is good. The one at Nugget Bridge, it doesn't work too well, but it's really good for all the other ones. Like on SS Anne and Lavender Tower, this just goes off, really. It's really good against Sabrina. With good speed IVs and potentially good speed nature, this could potentially sweep Sabrina with Shadow Ball. The good thing is that it doesn't really matter what its IVs are for attack, because whether it's got really bad physical attack or special attack or whatever, it's still 2-shots Jinx either way. It has Shadow Ball, so even if Jinx is calm minding, Houndoom could just 2-shot it. Special attack is usable, I guess. And if it's got good speed nature, it's actually insane because it will outspeed Jinx along with stuff like Gengar, which is really nice. And the main thing that makes Houndoom really good, the main thing that solidifies Houndoom is a staple in Nuzlocks, is Early Bird. Early Bird's a fantastic ability on this because all the things that you'll be using Houndoom against, Gengars and Jinxes, they all have sleep moves. And Houndoom just counters that outright. It's the best Jinx answer in a game. Even for the rival, you can use it against the Grass Starter in the champion fight, and you can use it against the Metagross, so it's okay for that. It's good against Agatha. It has a few uses. It is mostly just like a near perfect Jinx counter, but it does have some other uses too. If it's got bad IVs, Jinx can take it out with a crit, so you do need to be careful. But it's probably the best Dark type in the game. It really is, and this game has an absolute boner for sleep moves, which Houndoom can somewhat handle. It's also really good against Erica, because it just shrugs off to sleep really well, which is awesome. Sometimes with Early Bird, you get like a 0 turn of sleep, which is really funny to pull off. Kingdra, this thing is A tier. Now, you could make an argument for S-. I might put it an S-, and this depends on which starter you choose. If Jinx is your starter and your rival has Magmar, Kingdra is very vital. So, Kingdra, it's got good stats in general, we know this. It's a water type, but the dragon type is really nice because it doesn't get destroyed by grass and electric types, and it gets at 4 times resist to fire. And it can hit pretty hard with Surf. It's really, really good for Giovanni too. This thing literally sweeps Giovanni too. Swift Swim with Rain Dance is very, very good. Blaine gets swept by this thing, so does Giovanni too. You set up Rain Dance, now you're twice as fast, you outspeed everything in the game regardless of your speed stat. And you have a 50% boost to your Surf, on top of its already solid special attack. You can give it like Mystic Water to make it hit even harder. You could try and hit Hydro Pump if you want to be really cheesy, but you probably don't want to risk that. It's got solid bulk as well, so it can take hits while it's setting up Rain Dance too, then just destroy everything in return. It's also good for Elite Four really. It can still be kind of useful just because of its raw stats, but this is probably the best Magmar answer in the whole game because it's 4 times resistant to its fire moves. It can use Surf then destroy in 1 hit in return, which is really good. It can also cancel out Magmar going for Sunny Day. So if you're playing Jinx, you will need this to counter the rival, and you'll be using this for some other boss fights too. So being a staple, if you pick one of the starters, is kind of like Houndoom, like the reason why it's so high up here. Suicune, honestly, I've never used a Suicune. probably A tier, I would say. It's mono water, but it doesn't really do too much. It's another passive wall. Like, you can use Surf and Ice Beam, I guess. It walls, but it doesn't hit too hard. You can pressure stall the rest, but a lot of mons can actually whittle down Seeking, I guess. You're only going to be getting this at the Elite Four. In most mons, you'll be seeing at each of the Elite Fours will have ways of fighting Suicune anyways. So it's not even the best for that, really. It does have really good bulk and legendary stats, but it's just another mono water, really. You could do rest and PP stall with pressure. You might be able to toxic stall, kind of like Milotic. That's kind of it, really. Snorlax is just a better wall when it comes to special hits, I feel. Blossom, this thing is really good. This thing deserves to be in the A tier for sure. Oddish is a very nice mod, and we talked about Vileplume, but Blossom is better than Vileplume, really. You get Oddish at the start of the game. It's really good for Brock, really good. Then, for Misty, you get Blossom, and this thing is really good. Very good stats. Better special attack than Vileplume, and special defense than Vileplume, and special defense is really important. It takes hits from Misty's team really well. It can counter the Stormy pretty well. It's got status moves too. It's really good against Lieutenant Surge as well, because of its just really good stats. It doesn't have Synthesis like Bayleaf does, but it does have much better stats. And you can use it against Erica too, against Ludicolo, so it's pretty interesting. It does get Leaf Blade. This has a really good stab grass move in Leaf Blade. This and Sceptile are the only grass types that actually have good moves, which is kind of surprising. But yeah, early game mon that can carry you through the first 3 gyms, that alone deserves to put it that high. Same goes for Sunflora, really. Sunflora is technically a worse version of Blossom, but it is better early on to some extent. Like, you get Sunflora for Brock, which is very powerful, and it's got better moves. It has Mega Drain for Brock and Razor Leaf, which are much stronger than what Oddish can have. In like, it has that again for Misty. I don't know if it gets. Does it get Giga Drain for Lieutenant Surge? I actually can't remember. If it does, that's pretty good, but it's just a useful mon against Lieutenant Surge. Grass type that can deal damage and heal itself up, and wall electric type moves. Pretty useful. But yeah, this thing can just carry you through early game. You really want to get this, really. Raikou. This is probably I would say this might actually be the best legendary. It's Zapdos, but it's got better stats. It's Zapdos, but faster, but that extra speed is really important. It's also got psychic coverage, which is pretty good for Agatha, I guess. It's another mon that you'll only really be using for Elite Four, but it can actually do some stuff, really. It's a pretty speedy mon. It is Electabuzz, but worse, but it's probably it's like the next best Electric type, I would say. Good stats, you can maybe pressure stall. It's got some solid bulk too, really. Steelix, this is potentially an S- mon. I mean, it is in almost every game it's in. You know why. You know what the deal is. Steel type, amazing defense, ground coverage. Just good mon, really. You use it throughout the game once you get it. All normal types, all the flying types, all the bug types, poison types, really. This pivots like crazy. You can use it against Elite Four. It can be a bit hard to use against Elite Four, but until then you'll be using it in so many fights, really. It's just pretty solid mon, really. You know what the deal is with Steelix. Scizor, okay. It's just the final. I mean, there is Mew. Okay, Mew and Celebi, these are post-game only, which I do technically count post-game. But we'll just skip them. Because they're legendaries that you get in post-game, so whatever. Scizor, though, this is probably S tier, or S- actually. This is a very, very important mon. I'll probably put this in S-, but this is probably like the best S- mon, I would say. Scizor is incredible. It's a guaranteed mon that you will get every single run. Really good typing. insanely high attack. Its moveset is pretty bad, but its humongous attack stat makes up for it. It still has Silver Wind. At least it's got a usable buck move. And it's got Wing Attack too, which you can use. Silver Wind can oftentimes give you that juicy 10% boost. It's really good for the rival. This can somewhat counter Jinx. This does really well against Jinx. It doesn't always beat it, but sometimes you can just one-shot it. Really is crazy. Give it a Lumberry so it doesn't get put to sleep and just smack it in one hit. It counters the champion's grass type really well, so you will be taking it every time, especially if the rival has Venusaur, which is the hardest grass type to counter, because it's immune to Sludge Bomb. You can also use it quite a bit during Elite Four, really. It does pretty well against Agatha. It can somewhat counter Crobat, and it can tank all those ghost moves pretty well, because ghost types are physical. And you can use it to pivot really well. And it's got pretty solid bulk too. And you can actually... I mean, you could use it against the Champions Lead because it does have Wing Attack for flying coverage, but you probably will be dodging a crit from the Heracross. But you bring us to so many major fights. It's really good for Giovanni as well. This can wall out a Persian, which is really well. It does pretty good against the Tyranitar too. It also destroys Giovanni's Cacturn, so you use it for basically every rival fights. The Giovanni fights, you can use it. You use it for Koga, use it for main game, and use it for post game Elite Four. Because post game Elite Four also, Scizor does really well against it. There's lots of mons that get walled out by Scizor, or Scizor can pivot out on. Agatha, for example, has quite a few Psychic types, so it's just an amazing mon, really. So with that, okay, 48 minutes. Okay, I've recuperated all that time that I've lost. I'll try not to delete the recording for Johto this time. But yeah, now we just have to do all the Hoenn mons, and there is a lot because the Hoenn dex is pretty big. So, on to the Hoenn mons. So, first up we have Sceptile, and this is actually a pretty decent mon. I'll probably put it an A-. Actually, potentially A. I'd say it's not as good as like the other grass types like Meganium and Blossom and Sunflora. Basically, well, I mean, you could make that argument actually. It's a pretty important mon, like roughly here. I'd say in between these two tiers. Because it's really, really good for Brock. Definitely. It's pretty solid for Misty. It's not as good as the other grass types, but it's pretty solid for Misty. I mean, it's not very good for Lieutenant Surge because only grass move you can give it is like Absorb or like TM Bullet Seed. But Sceptile is really good for the final Giovanni fight because it hard counters Swampert. It outspeeds it and one-shots it with Leaf Blade, which is pretty cool. Not that many grass types can actually do that. So yeah, Sceptile is pretty solid just because of that. Blaziken, honestly, I do not know. I don't think Blaziken is good. You basically never get Blaziken because it's on the same route as Sceptile, and you would always get that instead. It's a fighting type, but it's not that bulky, it's not that fast. It's also weak to ground types, so like Kangaskhan can actually beat it with Earthquake. Very few situations where you'd actually want to use Blaziken, but it's still has decent stats, I guess. Now I really don't know. Probably B tier, really. Swampert. Okay. This thing is undoubtedly S or S-, I would say. Definitely one of these two top tiers. Basically, it's Quagsire, but much better. Much better than Quagsire. Hits harder, much bulkier. It's also a bit faster too, and has more special attack. It's better in every way. You get this right before Brock, and it's really useful throughout the game. It's solid for Brock. It's really good for Lieutenant Surge. You give it TM Dig, which is 80 base power. It's also got Mud Shot. It can pivot really well and like beat his Manectric and the Raichu. It just puts in so much work. Then you'll be bringing it to basically every single rival fight. It's a staple. If you're, regardless of which starter you pick, it hard counters Ampharos and Electabuzz. It's just good for Elite Four in general because its stats are so good. It switches in all the Rock type coverage moves that are in the Elite Four. It's just a solid mon, good stats with only one weakness, which is actually really rare. There's very few actual grass type mons. Even against a champion, you can use it against like the Metagross as well, and potentially against the Houndoom too. Just a really good mon. You know how good Swampert is. My Tiana, this thing, B tier, probably, maybe even less. Like, it's got Intimidate, and it can maybe handle Psychic types, and that's literally it. You get this late on in the game, though. You get it for Sabrina, though. It's slow and it's frail, its special defense sucks, so it's not even a counter to things like Alakazam and such. You can maybe check it, switch it in the Psychic type move. You can sack it to Sabrina. That's literally its only use in the whole run. Linoon D tier, I literally do not know where you get Zigzagoon. I've never encountered Zigzagoon. I think like in post game, yeah, I caught it in post game. In main game, I actually don't know where you find this. Maybe it's like late on. It's better than Furret, but at least Furret, you can actually use it when you get it for like a little bit. Linoon, you just can't. Same with Beautyfly, it's just garbage. It's just so bad. It's like Venomoth. I don't even know where you encounter it. I think you can get it in Viridian Forest, but I never actually encounter it really. It has almost no redeeming qualities. Dustox is a little bit less garbage, purely because of its defensive typing. It completely invalidates a lot of grass and bug types, and it can heal itself up and use Toxic. It has that going for it, but that's literally it. Ludicolo, I barely actually get this. I think this is A-. You could make an argument for A tier. A- or A. I'll probably put an A-. You can get this before Lieutenant Surge, which is actually pretty solid. I think, can you get this? You can get this before Misty, which is actually really good. It's hard to encounter, but if you do get it, it's actually pretty good. It counters a lot of water types in the game. That's like its main purpose. It doesn't have good moves though. I think it gets Fake Out, which is pretty nice. Good special defense. If there is rain, you can use this with it. It's not insane, but it's good at countering water types, I guess. That's basically it. Shiftry, this thing's garbage. I've never found a use for this. I've gotten Seedot before, I've never found a use for it. It's a dark type, but most psychic types you'll use it against can just destroy Shiftry. I could put it in C tier purely because it counters Gardevoir, because I think Gardevoir has electric and psychic coverage, which Shiftry can somewhat wall out, but then Shiftry doesn't really damage Gardevoir in return. So yeah, it kind of is D tier. You'll just never use it, really. Swellow, I think this belongs in B or A-. I'll put it in B tier, honestly. You can trade it for a perfect IV Farfetch'd, which I put on his list. I think it's an A-, the Farfetch'd. I actually can't remember where I put the Farfetch'd, but it's here somewhere. You can trade Swellow for the Farfetch'd, that's here in B tier. So there's that one use to get the extra drip. On its own right, it's okay. You could use it against Misty. It's not the best. Guts can be useful. And I know Gut Swellow sounds insane, but it's not actually that insane. I actually never really see the need for pre-statusing and using Facade. I think Facade is only available in post-game if I'm not mistaken, or later on. So I don't think you can really get much out of it. And Swellow's base attack isn't high enough to where it can consistently one-shot things. And Swellow's frail and its typing is bad to the point where most leads or most mons you'd use Swellow against can just one-shot it in return if they don't get one-shot themselves. So Swellow's really hard to use. It's still good against Erica, I guess. It's whatever. It's still really fast. Pelipper, I've never ever found a use for this, ever. Like, its special defense sucks, so most special attackers just one-shot it with the crits. It's got good special attack and defense, I guess. You can maybe do some pivoting. But I guess it's not as garbage as these mons, but by the time you get it, you're not going to have use for it. Gardevoir, this is decent. You could trade it for Lickitung, but you're not doing that. It's got good special defense. You can give it Shadow Ball to fight other Psychic types. You can give it Thunderbolt, Psychic, Magical Leaf, Ice Punch. Synchronize doesn't really work like it does in other generations. It's just okay. It's just Alakazam but slow, which isn't so good, and it's got less coverage also. So it's alright, but it's just outclassed by other Psychic types. Masquerain, C tier. The only saving grace is this thing has Intimidate. That's literally it. It's got Intimidate, so you can at least use it for some amount of pivoting, but that's it. That stops it from being D tier. Breloom, this thing is actually pretty good. I like getting this. You could make an argument for A or A minus. It's a grass fighting type. Maybe I would put it here. I mean, you could delay it and get Spore. If you delay Shroomish to level 50, which you could do, because you can encounter Shroomish at the island free, so it'll be at level 45, you could get Spore, which is interesting if it's got good speed IVs. Fighting coverage is pretty cool. You can usually encounter this before Erica, and it's really good for the first Giovanni fight. It's also really good for Erica because it one-shots her Blissey. You can also use it for Giovanni 2 and 3. That's pretty much it, but it is pretty useful for those fights actually. I think it's more of A-. I guess Mach Punch, Brick Break. It has priority, I guess, to revenge KO Pokemon. It's alright. Now, slacking. This is definitely like towards the top. I feel like this has to be S or S-, I think. I'll probably put an S tier. The reason why it's not like top of S is because it's not a sweeping machine. Like, you do have to switch it in and switch out, whereas Electabuzz can just sweep. Slacking is incredible. There are ways to manipulate yourself getting it late game. Its IVs can also matter. It's on that 100 speed where its speed is like really borderline fast. If it's got bad speed, it's going to just fall short of outspeeding a lot of things, but if it's got good speed, it'll barely outspeed a lot of things, and that's what you really want. Its attack is really high, it's got really good bulk. You can use Counter, Encore, Yawn, you can use Return, you can use Double Edge, which is insanely strong. In post game, you get Silk Scarf, making it even stronger. It's just an excellent mon. You can even give it like Ice Beam and Thunderbolt for Lance. You know what the deal is with slacking. This thing is incredibly good. Truon does hold it back from being the very top, I would say. It's still incredible. I just love using slacking, I really do. Next up is Ninjask and Shedinja. Now these mons, I think you can only get these in post game. They're not available in the main game, so Ninjask is garbage. It doesn't have good moves. I'll say it's more of a D tier mon. It has Aerial Ace, and that's it. It's just a garbage bug. It's Beautifly but faster. That's literally it. Shedinja, this thing is insane. It's just I don't know how you actually get an Nincada in this game. I think it's like some weird post-game encounter that's really hard to find. But I guess you could say it's like you could probably put an S here, to be honest. Actually, from what I've seen, a lot of trainers actually aren't capable of countering Shedinja. Yeah, like all of Bruno's team, all of Agatha's team can counter it, and a good chunk of Lance's team can counter Shedinja. So it's kind of hard. I'll put an S-, just because it's hard to use, but when it does work, it just destroys anything in its path. Like, you know why Shedinja, it's just a broken mon, really. X-Cloud is garbage. Mono normal, that's slow and frail. There's nothing else to say about it. No redeeming qualities, you get it late on. Hariyama, decent fighting type, just like Machamp in Breloom. You can use it for the Giovanni fights, be it rock and normal and steel types. I think it gets fake outs. Fake fat means it can take special hits, so it's got some okayish bulk. That's pretty much it. Nose Pass, this thing is really bad. Maybe C tier just because you can sort of use against Crobat. It's not even that good against it, but you could use it against Crobats, I guess. Thunder Wave and Rock Slide them. At least it can kind of counter something, unlike Seeking and such. Delcatty, this thing, I'll put in C tier just because this is an early game mon, and you can evolve this for Misty, and its stats are not garbage for that point in the game. So at least it has some use in your Nuzlocke. Sableye, this thing I think can be potentially B tier, purely because of its typing. Typing, stab, physical ghost moves with OK attack and fake out. I think also gets recover and some other stuff. Good against psychic types. That's basically it. It might be able to like one-shot Alakazams with fake out and Shadow Ball. Its IVs will be quite important. It's not the best. It's kind of like Mychiana and Sneasel. It's decent against psychic types, but it's not amazing either. But it can pivot as well. Mawile, C tier. Steel type with Intimidate is good. No good moves. Really bad stats. Just holds it back completely. Metal Claw's its strongest move, and that's just really not good enough. Aggron, this thing deserves to be pretty high up. I would say maybe A tier, but you could potentially make an argument for S minus. I haven't used it that much, but I think Chad-ilicious is better. Aggron, it just walls out so many mons. Like 4-time resists, all the flying moves, normal, bug, they all just get destroyed. Psychic types can also sort of get walled out. I mean, special defense isn't that good. It definitely has use. You could take it to Elite 4. I don't know if it's as good as Chad-ilicious, but it's humongous defense. It's not going to be good for every matchup, but in matchups where it is good, it's just pretty amazing. Against stuff like Crobat and such, this Pokemon just feels invincibly strong. It's pretty funny. Medicham, I've never actually used this. There is a guaranteed trade. You can trade Ampharos for a Medicham with good IVs. That's probably solid. So I'll put in B tier because really strong fighting type, but it's extremely hard to get, and you have to trade Ampharos for it, and it's pretty late on. And Ampharos is not easy to get to begin with. So yeah, Manectric. I feel like this is just like it's maybe A tier. I think it's Raichu but better, but it's Electabuzz but way worse. It is basically Raichu with better stats, with more power, but it doesn't have as good stats as Electabuzz. It's got less coverage. It gets Flamethrower, which is pretty good. And I think it might get Crunch, but that's basically it for coverage. Fast and strong electric type Mon, it's kind of simple really. Plusle and Minun, they're just worse outright. They can go to C tier just because they are electric type Mons. They can be good against a lot of the flying types that you come up against, but they're the worst ones. Really, you're always going to have better electric types, usually, so... Full Beat and Illumies, I've never once ever seen a use for these Pokemon. I just don't know how you use them. They don't even have good moves, they don't have good attack, they don't have good defense. By the time you get those Mons, you'll have zero reason to use them. I think they're only available like late into the game or post game or something, so yeah, they suck. Roselia, this is pretty solid. I think A minus. Roselia basically does the exact same thing that Blossom in Sunflora does. You get it at Cerulean City, but it's just a bit worse. So it's still really good against Misty. It's decent against Lieutenant Surge. I'd say it's a little bit worse than Blossom and Sunflora. And then it falls off. But, you know, it's still really good for early game. Some of the hardest gym fights. Grass type is really nice to have for that point in the game. The Poison type can also make it pretty decent for Erica. It deserves some recognition because of that. Swalots, I'll probably put in C tier. I think this you can only get it like a bit later on. You might be able to get it before Erica, so it's good for Erica. I just can't really find a good use for this. It's got okay-ish stats, I guess. It gets Sludge and Toxic in that setting. Yeah, I don't know how you're going to Toxic Stall with this Mon. It's got okay-ish stats. It's just so unremarkable. It's Muck, but way worse, basically. I don't, like, it's just so unremarkable, really. Sharpedo is also a C tier Mon. Good typing, good speed, good attack, but it's kind of screwed over by the physical special splits. It's more of a physical attacker, but it doesn't have any good physical attack to speak of. Its special attack is good, but it's not good enough. And it has virtually zero defense. It's also fast, but it's not ridiculously fast, so it does not even counter Jinx. Jinx could just destroy it with a crit ice beam. Like, literally, crit ice beam might actually one-shot it if its special defense is low enough. And I guess Shadow Ball on Sharpedo is strong. Like, Sharpedo could have some niche use against Sabrina, and even then it's going to be pretty IV reliant, and yeah, good luck using Sharpedo. And Ruskin doesn't really do anything. Wailord C tier. It's just another mono washer that I never used, and I don't know where you'd use it. You can get Wailmer like pretty early, but it evolves at level 14 by that point. Like, I don't really know what you're doing with it. You could use it for Blaying because it does have some bulk, but it's kind of sort of like Blastoise, I would say. It's just not that good, really. It's so unremarkable. It's a mon that you kind of just forget exists. Okay, a good mon, Camrupt. This can go to the top of the list, probably S tier I would say. Camrupt is a very good mon. Now you might be wondering, why is this mon so highly ranked? Well, on its own, Camrupt it's alright. Camrupt is just okay. You get it in Mount Moon, and you can actually guarantee it at the end of the game, which is pretty good actually. That's actually really good. It's a ground type that's really good for the rival fights. It's not as good as Swampert in that, but it can like counter the Ampharos, because Ampharos only has fire and electric type coverage, which Camrupt completely walls. It can probably take a cross chop crit from the Electabuzz, so that's pretty solid. So yeah, you can get some use out of it. But what makes Camrupt so insane is that you can trade it to an NPC at Cinnabar Island for a guaranteed good nature Shelgon, and that's just incredible. Shelgon is really good. Salamence. The Salamence is guaranteed to have really good IVs and a good nature. So that's just insane. The Camrupt is good because you can get use from it throughout the game, then when you're at the end of the game you can trade it for an amazing mon. So Nummel's just a really good encounter to get because of that. Torkoal, I don't even know where you get Torkoal. I think it's only at the end of the game. So because of that, it's C tier. Like, it's not the worst thing ever. Yeah, it's just mono fire type, not a good defensive typing. Like, honestly, you could put this in D tier. Like, I don't know how you're going to use Torkoal, really. By the time you get this mon, which I think you can get in a rock tunnel, so you could put C tier. Like, I just don't see anyone using it. Magcargo has similar stats, but at least Magcargo has the rock typing to give some niche use and some resistances. Torkoal doesn't even have that, so it's just a worse version of Magcargo, really. It's just booty. Grumpig also, it's really hard to encounter. Probably B tier. It does have thick fat and good special defense, and you can give it Shadow Ball, I guess, to fight other psychic types. That's literally it. It's kind of like Hypno, I guess, but can also resist fire and ice moves. You could actually use it against Jinx, honestly. You could sort of use it against Jinx. That kind of works. But yeah, it's so unremarkable, and you'll probably never encounter it, really. Spinda, Mono Normal, we know they're all garbage. It didn't even get a buff, so that's all you need to know. Flygon, okay, this is a good mon. Now, this mon is really hard to encounter. If you do get it, I could definitely make the argument for this being A tier. You could, I don't know if it's S minus, I don't know if it's that good, but definitely A tier. I think this is only encounterable in like Safari Zone, but it's really good for all the rival fights. You could take it to Elite 4, its stats are pretty good, it's fast, Dragon Ground is really nice. Gives it 2 immunities, which is pretty cool, and resist rock type moves, which is really nice. And I think, does this thing get Earthquake by level up? Because if so, that is, I think it does in this game, which is really good. It's just solid, really. You can give it fire moves, mix attacker, pretty fast, stab, earthquake, resistances and immunities. Flygon's just a solid mon, really. Character in this thing, just like Shiftry, it's just garbage. The same exact reason as Shiftry. I don't know if it's better or worse, really. Altaria, this thing's garbage. Actually, you can make an argument for D tier. It's good for Erica, but apart from that, I can't find any other use for it. You could use Dragon Dance setup, which I do not allow, but even then, like, how are you using Dragon Dance to Altaria? Altaria needs so many Dragon Dances just to deal damage because it's so weak, and even then, like, it's just not going to survive for that many turns. It's slow, it doesn't hit hard, it doesn't have any strong moves at all. TM Dragon Claw, I guess, which you get in Victory Road, or HM Fly is kind of strong, I guess, 90 base power. And just, it's got solid special defense and good typing, but that's really all it's got going for it, really. It's just not a good mon. Zangoose, this thing is usable. B tier, I would say, just because you could use it against, actually it's probably more of a C tier mon. You can use it against Erica, not Erica, Sabrina. Somewhat fast Shadow Baller. You can use it against Sabrina, and that's literally it. It's fast, but it's not that fast. It doesn't outspeed that many things. It's pretty frail. Its attack is high, but it's not stupidly strong. It does have good stab moves, like strength, I guess. So at least Zangoose has an 80 base power stab move, which is more than I can say for quite a lot of mons. It's not good. Survivor, garbage. It's like Arbok but without Intimidate. Yeah. It's like Swallow but worse. It's got good coverage, like Giga Drain, Flamethrower, Earthquake, but you have to give it those TMs, which you just don't want to do. Lunatone, this thing is B tier. In Solrock 2 for the exact same reason. These mons are both, they're really meh. The rock types are always fine just because of their resistances. Rock types with Levitate and Psychic types are actually good for fighting other Psychic types because they can tank the Psychics and hit hard with physical moves. Solrock especially can have pretty strong rock slides. It could potentially beat Jinx. It's not a very good idea, but you could potentially use it against it. Actually, honestly, I could make an argument. Actually, you know what? I think it's more C tier. Because even the Crobats have Shadow Ball, so even Crobat can like beat these mons. They don't even counter that. I just think it's really hard to use these mons against anything. Like, they're bulky, but they're not that bulky. They don't have good moves. Lunatone has Psychic, but it's not even that strong. They're slow. Solrock only has Rock Slide, which just sucks. They're just so bland, really. Like, they're so situational. Wishcash, however, this thing deserves to be pretty high up. I would say S-. Well, kind of border. I could make an argument for this being S tier. Actually, I think I'll put this in S tier and this in S-. The reason why is because Wishcash is basically a replacement Swampert. It's a Swampert at home, but it's still a very good mon. It actually gets rest by level up, which is really cool. And it's just a really nice mon. Like, Water Ground is really good. You bring it to all the rival fights. If you're picking Sumuchum, this Pokemon might actually be mandatory because you have to fish it up to counter Macbee at the start of the game. That's if you're actually doing that optional rival fight, but it is optional, so you don't actually need it. Barboach is pretty useful for Brock as well, and it doesn't evolve until after Lieutenant Surge, so it's not really useful for that fight. So it is Swampert at worst, but it's Swampert but worse, but it's still useful. If, for example, you didn't get Swampert or you lost your Swampert, this mon is still really good as backup. It's better than Quagsire, better stat-wise, also. So it's got that going for it. Crawdaunt, this thing sucks. It's C tier because it's good typing and it can get Shell Armor, but you can't abuse it. Its stats suck. You all know how its physical special split is so jank. It does have Surf and Crunch, which is pretty cool. You could use this against Jinx. You could use Crawdaunt against Jinx and some other Psychic types because it does not get crit if it's got Shell Armor, so that's good. That's really all it's got going for it, really. Special defense could be better. Claydol, this mon's extremely hard to get. I never actually encountered this, but I could be B tier just because it's a ground type, but being Psychic type also gives some unique properties like being immune to other ground type moves. Being weak to Shadow Ball is kind of annoying because a lot of mons pack Shadow Ball, but you have to give his Dig, which is kind of annoying. I don't know if it gets Psychic by level up. I don't know what level up moves Claydol gets. It's got good special bulk, alright physical bulk, Nyx attacker. This can probably... Actually, I don't think this is going to counter Electabuzz because it's not going to do enough damage to one-shot Electabuzz. It probably counters Ampharos though. Which even then, I don't even know about that. It's whatever. It's one of the more underwhelming ground-type mons. Cordillea, I actually don't know how you find Cordillea. I think this might be a post-game exclusive mon. So this Normaldo, I think I'll put him in C tier just because I think these mons are only available in the post-game in Island 7, and that's it. I don't know where else you find them. If you can get them in the main game, I might change my opinion on them. But I feel like these mons are actually decent. I think these mons are actually not bad. If you can get them early on, they could definitely be B, A- for sure. Armaldo, I think, gets Battle Armor, which is a really good ability. It can take out flying types, really good attack, solid bulk. Cordelia's got good special bulk, but doesn't have good moveset. I think it gets Recover, which is quite nice. Cordelia, I think, is harder to use because its typing isn't that good. There's going to be quite a lot of ice coverage later on. almost everything in Elite Four can hit Cordelia super effectively, and I don't see Cordelia having a good matchup. And same with Armaldo, I feel like its matchup for the Elite Four just isn't that good. So, I'll put them in C tier because they are decent mons in their own right. It's just by the time you get them, you're not going to be using them really. Milotic, this thing deserves to be pretty high tier. You know how good Milotic is. I would put an A-, honestly. It's good, but I never needed it. After like mid-game in like Blaine, I just never saw myself needing a Milotic. Compared to the mons in the tiers above, these mons I just use more. But Milotic, you can't deny it's a good mon. Its special bulk is insane, it's really good for Misty, I did use it for that fight, and you can guarantee Milotic in every single run. Yeah, it gets Recover to stall out, Surf, Ice Beam, you know the deal. In post game, I could definitely see the use of using Toxic Stall with Recover, because this is one of the mons that can actually heal itself up. If it gets paralyzed or something, its defense actually goes up with the Marvel scale. So that could be pretty useful. I think that's something I'll have to experiment with. But yeah, Milotic is a pretty good special wall, but I feel like Snorlax is just categorically better in most cases, really. Cast form, this thing sucks. You have to get this guaranteed at Silphco, which you can do, but you'd rather just get the Hitmons instead. And like, what is cast form doing? It's slow, it's frail, it doesn't hit that hard, it's got no good stab moves, it's got coverage. I mean, you could say it's better, but it's like whatever, really. It's just so unremarkable. Kecleon, I might put this in C tier, purely because Kecleon is okay against Sabrina. It's got that one saving grace niche. It can do one thing somewhat okayishly. It's a normal type with good physical attack. It gets like Shadow Ball, and it's got really good special defense, and that's it. It can take a Psychic maybe and hit back with Shadow Ball, and that's kind of it, really. That's like all Kecleon does, but at least it can do something better than the D tiers can. Anything that has even slight use can be in C tier, but D tiers for stuff that's like actually worthless. Banette and Dusclops, same reason, C tier. They're just not good mons. You would think Dusclops would be better, but it's really not. Dusclops is actually a lot more frail than you think, because it's got basically 0 HP. Banette has really high attack, and Banette is like the one ghost type that can actually take advantage of the really strong physical Shadow Balls with Stab, which is great. It can just one-shot Jinx, and most Psychic and Ghost types in the game, which is really good, but Banette is slow and frail, so it's really hard to do. There's no way in hell Banette is switching in on Jinx unless you use Insomnia to like eat up the sleep move. Banette can still be pretty good for Sabrina. That's pretty much it. Dusclops isn't even that good. Dusclops is pretty weak, and it's slow, and it's got okayish bulk. That's it. I just don't know how you're going to be using Dusclops. It's just not very good. Tropius sucks. It's useless. Bad typing. These okayish stats. Not good moves. I mean, it's got okay. It's got Synthesis and Fly, and that's it. Its typing is just awful. There's never a situation where you'll be using Tropius. Maybe someone in the comment section could prove me wrong. That'll be interesting to hear. Chimecho, this thing also isn't very good. I think the stat buff, actually, I think this thing got a stat buff which saves from being absolute trash tier. Plus Levitate. It has some use at least. I'll give it that, but it's a mon that you'll never get and you'll never use. You're only, actually I'll put in, to be fair, it's probably is a D tier mon. The reason why it's D tier is because you only get this, I think, in Island Free, and by that point, like, what are you doing with Chimecho? Absol, this thing could be C tier. It's kind of, for similar reasons as Banette, really. Really high attack, deals a lot of damage, but slow and frail. It's probably worse than Banette. Well, it's better. It deals less damage because of the Dark type, so Shadow Ball deals less damage to Psychic types, but because of the Dark type, you can actually switch in Psychic types, so it gets a free turn to switch. Like Sabrina's Drinks, for example, a Psycho Boost, which this can switch in, probably take one Blizzard and hit back hard. So yeah, similar reason to Banette, really. Hits hard, but slow and frail, pretty much. Glalie, C tier. You can get a guaranteed trade for a Glalie. In right above Vermilion City, you have to trade a Seadoll for it. It's got pretty good IVs, mild nature, but It's a glalie. Like, how good could it possibly be? 80 in every stat. I guess at least it's got a really strong stab move, but I just don't see glalie doing anything, really. It's got better stats than the D tiers, I'll say. But actually, you could definitely make an argument for it being D tier, because I've gotten this thing a few times in runs from that guaranteed trade, and I've never had a fight where I needed glalie. Never, not one. So it's like, if I can't think of a single use for it, it belongs in D tier. At least the mons in C tier, I can think of random uses for him, which is more than I can say. Honestly, I think stuff like Azumarill, you could probably put in D tier, but whatever. Wolverine, this thing is pretty decent. I could put A-. You can get this early on in Rock Tunnel, but you're probably not going to encounter it there. You'll probably get it later on, but Wolverine has really good stats. It's kind of like a budget Milotic. It's like a budget Lapras. Really good stats, good typing. Fig Fat is really nice. Really strong moves. You could potentially use Rest to heal itself up. That is pretty good. A is weak to a lot of the fighting and rock type coverage and electric type coverage that you'll be seeing Elite for, and it's not as especially bulky as Wolverine. It's also a lot slower. And it hits hard, but you're not going to be one-shotting a lot of things Elite Four, so it's hard to use. It is just pretty solid mon purely because of its raw stats. It's not good for Elite Four, but you can use it until then. I can see it's being good for Lorelei if you're doing Toxic Stall, but that's kind of it. But it's still not the worst thing, really, you could use. It's still okay. Huntail and Gorbis, I think these should both be in B tier. I'll say Huntail goes to C tier and Gorbis in B. Gorbis is just better because they're both special attacking mons, and Gorbis is the special attacking specialist. Like, honestly, Huntail, you could definitely make an argument for being here because they're pretty good against a rival. Huntail's actually somewhat okay-ish at beating the rival Smoochum at Nugget Bridge, and Gorbis is really good at beating the rivals Magby at Nugget Bridge, which can be really hard to counter because, you know, Water Pulse will just destroy Magby. Gorbis has pretty decent stats, and it can use Swift Swim with Rain Dance, similar to Kingdra. This is also capable of sweeping almost single-handedly Giovanni 2 and Blaine. I feel like these mons they're basically Kingdra but worse in terms of Swift Swimmers, but they're still okay-ish, I would say. They could maybe counter Magmar, but it's going to be really hard because Magmar has a Thunder Punch and these things don't have great special defense, so you have to dodge a crit. Like, they're alright, I guess. Relicanth, this thing is, I don't know how you encounter. I'll put it in C tier just because it's extremely hard to encounter. I don't know if you could even get this before main game. I actually don't know how. I think this might be a post game only mon. I don't know what it does really. Like, it's a rock type, so it does rock type things. It also, like, it's, I don't know what its special attack is like. I think it's got okay-ish special attack, and rock type coverage isn't the greatest. Obviously, it's got goodish defense. It's slow, but it's, I don't know if you even get this. Or I think if you do get it, it's really late on. If you got this earlier on, yeah, I could definitely see it being more useful. This could potentially beat out Magmar because it switches in on fire moves. So yeah, it could have some really niche use, and it has good stats. So I'll put it up here really. Love Disc, C tier. Water type with 0 redeeming qualities. Probably the worst mono water type in the whole game. Even worse than Octillery and such, which is awful. Salamence. This thing goes all the way up. I would say S tier. The only reason it's S tier is because it can be pretty hard to get. Well, okay. So here's the thing with Salamence. Is that you can almost literally guarantee a Salamence in Rock Tunnel if you repel manip at level 17. I think it's like more often than not you will encounter a level 17 back-on, so you can get Salamence like for Koga, which is pretty good. But you might be better off trying to manip for a Numel later on to the game, so you can trade that Numel for a guaranteed good nature, good IV. I think it's always like naughty nature with above average IVs, and you just want to get that Salamence. It's better to get, because you don't want to get a random Salamence that's like quiet nature with 0 IVs in every stat. So yeah, either way, Salamence is a good mon. Just good stats everywhere. Intimidate, really good. It gets protect by level up, which is a good move with leftovers, so it can be pretty bulky. It does similar stuff to Gyarados, I guess, but it's got way more offensive power. Fly is an incredibly strong move. You can also just give it Aerial Lace, which can just one-shot, like the rival's Heracross at the champion fight. You can give it a Dragon Claw by level up, so you don't even have to waste a TM on it. Flamethrower can hit pretty hard. You can give it TM Earthquake, because its attack is that high, really. Just a good mon. Good typing, good stats, good ability. Decent moveset, decent mix attacker. It just works, really. And you can guarantee this thing having good IVs and good nature, which just makes it really consistent to use in your Nuzlocks. And I think that's pretty much us at the end with the final mon, because these mons are all only available in post-game, so I will not be counting them. Metagross. This is another mon that deserves to be in the S tier. Amazing typing. If you get this mon in Rock Tunnel, you have lucked out massively. It's really hard to do. You can Magnet Pull for it, but that's still very not likely. You can get this in post game if you're lucky too. This mon's just incredible if you get it early on. It walls out like half the game. Psychic Steel, it can counter Jinx, and it's got better special attack, and it's also got, it's got like better special bulk than things like Fortress and Scizor. It can wall out stuff like Jinx really well, and it actually has really good physical moves. This has Shadow Ball, so this can slam things like Jinx. It gets Meteor Mash too, which could miss, but it's really powerful if it hits. Really good bulk, good attack, great typing, great stats, really. Metagross is incredible mon. This might even be better than Houndoom, because the 4-time resistance to Psychic means it might as well just be an immunity, and it's got more special bulk than Houndoom, so Ice Beam is going to be doing very much, and you can just one-shot Jinx outright. But even then, like, it's just really good against Sabrina in general. Half of Sabrina's team just can't really touch Metagross. There's quite a few mons like Crobats and such, they're not doing much to Metagross really. It's just an absolute powerhouse. Like, you know this thing just has amazing stats, really. So with this, I've now completed my definitive, objectively 100% correct Nuzlocke tier list for Fire Red Omega, covering every fully evolved Pokemon and even some legendaries, and mons that you can get in post-game. Honestly, this list, I feel it's pretty accurate. It's not completely perfect, there will be some mileage, some of you will have different opinions. You can let me know in the comment section, but I feel like I'm pretty accurate with most of these predictions. But the thing about Nuzlocking is that almost everyone here will have their own experiences and their own truths really, so it'll be pretty interesting to discuss with other people. But hopefully if you want to Nuzlocke this game, this tier list will be helpful. You can look at the mons that are like really high up in the tier list and make sure you're aiming to get them. Most of the mons that are up here are actually easy to manip. So yeah, that's pretty much the video over. It's been really long and I'm knackered from it. But let me know what you guys want to see next. Thank you guys for watching. This is Chad-ilicious, signing out.